Good evening, everybody. We're here for the public hearing on the proposed zoning change. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Mr. Jim Garrity is our solicitor. He will be running the festivities tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, the Township has received a rezoning request that is both a map amendment and a text amendment. We're having a hearing on that request this evening in compliance with Section 609 of the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. It is a request by the owners of the property known as 9303 Ridge Pike to do three things. One, to amend the Springfield Township zoning map by rezoning 7.11 acres of the property known as the TC tract, which is at 9303 Ridge Pike, from A residential and AA residential with AAA and AAA AQ1 overlays to the institutional zoning district. That's the first thing. The second thing is to amend the zoning code text, that's called a text amendment, within the institutional zoning district to permit the uses that you'll hear discussed this evening. And number three, the zoning code text amendment within the AAA age qualified 1 overlay district. Again, that's a text amendment, not a map amendment. This evening's hearing has been advertised in the Springfield Sun twice as required by the MPC, and in addition, public hearing notices were posted in the Township building and the public library, on the property itself, and in conspicuous places around the property. In addition, the full text of the ordinance and descriptions of the property, as well as sketch plans, were available here at the Township building, at the library, in the offices of Montgomery Publishing, and in the Montgomery County Law Library. And notices were also mailed to the property owner and to nearby property owners as required by the Springfield Township zoning ordinance. A summary of the ordinances that we're going to consider here this evening are as follows. The proposed zoning map amendments propose to change a certain parcel of land from A and AA residential to the institutional zoning district and may affect a 7.11 acre portion of Springfield Township known as the TC tract at 9303 Ridge Pike. The proposed zoning text amendments to the institutional zoning district propose to modify the front yard requirement, setback requirements, for buildings exceeding 35 feet in height. They would reduce the side yard requirement for buildings adjacent to a residential zoning district from 75 feet to 50 feet, reduce the rear yard setback from 75 feet to 50 feet, add an alternate provision for traffic to have access to a secondary street or driveway as long as that traffic is controlled by a traffic signal, clarify the need for loading areas to be effectively screened from residential and non-residential uses, and permit corner lots more than one access on one of the two streets adjacent to it, so long as that access is directed to a traffic signal. And then thirdly, the other zoning code text amendment to the AAA age qualified 1 zoning district proposes to increase the housing density. Decrease, I'm sorry, thank you, Don. To decrease the housing density from 1.8 units per gross developable acre to 1.15 units per gross developable acre. Decrease the total housing density from 2.2 units per net developable acreage to 1.3 units, and increase the required open space in the development, in such a development, from 50% to 60% of the gross developable acreage. Although rezoning goes to the legislative side of this board's responsibilities and is therefore not as formal as it can sometimes be in this room, we will go in a logical order. We will start with a presentation from the property owner who requests the zoning changes. There will then be questions from the board and questions only from the audience at that point. Then there will be testimony from the audience, subject to cross-examination, of course, and questions from the board, and questions from the property owner if there are questions of the neighbors or anyone who opposes the application. Now, in terms of procedural or housekeeping issues, I wanted to just note that we're making a recording, obviously, of tonight's proceeding, and we have received a number of review letters. and we'll mark them if we can. First, we have a review letter of the ordinance by the Montgomery County Planning Commission dated November 5, 2013, which is obviously the original amendments of this particular application, and particularly the AAA Age 1, Age Restricted overlay to this district. As Township, that was Township Exhibit 1. As Township Exhibit 2, we have a letter of November 16, 2015 from the Montgomery County Planning Commission. And as Township Exhibit 3, we have a November 25 review from the Township Planning Commission of the zoning ordinance amendment. In addition, if I can find them, we have a number of emails and a letter. I'm sorry. There it is. That's not it. Pardon me. There it is. I'll try to do these in order. It's a little bit difficult. We have emails to and from Nancy Templeton and Brendan Prine, dated November 27, both dated November 27, asking some questions. We then have a very long letter from Mr. Prine, dated November 29, and a response to that letter from Nancy Templeton by email, dated November 30. So all of those documents will also be exhibits to tonight's proceeding. As I said previously, we'll go first with the applicant and the reasons why this rezoning in the applicant's opinion makes sense, and then we'll proceed to questions and the views of the neighbors. So I know the applicant's represented by Mr. Ross Weiss. Mr. Weiss, would you like to begin?
Thank you. Jim, could we add the advertisements as township exhibits also?
Yes, all of those would be exhibits. I don't have the complete township file, but all of the advertising done for tonight's hearing would be made part of the record in the event a record is necessary.
Thank you very much. Good evening, members of the board. I'm pleased to be back here again. As you saw from the Planning Commission, County Planning Commission's review letter back from November of 2013, we're over 2 years into this project. And the big question tonight, I guess, is to you and to members of the public, why are we back here again, and what's different about this application today that justifies it being reconsidered by you for these 3 zoning changes? And what has happened since we were last here, and we were last here and had hearings in the spring of 2014, most recently in June of 2014, after which a majority of the members of the board did not approve the proposed ordinances, is that the Masonic Home has moved forward and built its additional multifamily units for its assisted living and senior housing. In addition, the Ridge Pike improvements have been approved and are moving forward. The driveway that's a common driveway that would access both the Masonic Home, the Atria project if it's approved, and the residential units behind the Atria project has been completed, and the intersection has been completed. The support for Atria as use on the 7 acres at the front of the property has remained strong. Both your planning commission, the county planning commission, and certain of the neighbors who are here tonight don't really quarrel with the proposed Atria use. Your planning commission, when we were before it in 2014, voted unanimously not to recommend what we request and what we're requesting tonight. But when we appeared before it on November 17th, just a couple of weeks ago, the first vote was 3-4 in favor of approving the 3 ordinances. 3 members voted for it and 4 voted against it. And the eventual motion that passed was 4-3. And the 4 members of the Planning Commission, your Planning Commission, that voted recommending that the ordinances be adopted had a caveat, and that was that the units, the single-family houses on the residential portion behind Atria should be 25 instead of the proposed 32. Of the 3 members of the Planning Commission who voted against that motion, 2 of them were two of the members that voted for our proposal. I think the inference being that they had voted against the 25-unit condition because they did not have a problem with the 32 single-family unit proposal. You'll hear tonight from the witnesses who are identified and what is an additional reason as to why this should be reconsidered and hopefully approved by you, that the number of residential units in the back, the approved plan provides for 52. That is a plan that since the last round of hearings, Mr. Nolan and I have worked with your solicitor and your staff. We've agreed on all the documents. All they need to do is be executed. We've agreed on the costs and quantities for the public improvements that would have to be installed. We've agreed on the dollar amount. The only thing that's left is to sign the documents to move forward with the 52 housing unit project. There's a financial benefit to the township, which is similar and improving as to what was the case in 2013. But I think the real important issue tonight as to why this project is worthy of your reconsideration is because the Atria use has its strong support. On one side, as you look at the property on the left, is a Masonic home, which is senior housing. On the opposite side, or on the right, is the Andorra Nursing Home, which has nursing uses and senior housing. So as the County Planning Commission has recognized, and as your Planning Commission has recognized, Ridge Pike on your side, on the boundary line with White Marsh Township, has 3 senior housing uses that are consistent with each other and make sense to be at that location. Another issue that's the same tonight as was a year and a half ago is the neighbors who are in objection. And their objection is primarily driven, as we understand it, to the density of the housing that would be behind the Atria piece. And you will see in a couple of minutes that that plan has even changed. Not only have we reduced the number from 34 to 32, which may not seem like a lot, but it is 2 units. We've relocated those units so that one of our staunchest opponents will now have 4 acres of open space adjacent to his property or buffering his property from the residential units behind. Another consideration that's the same is Atria's belief that its presence in the township will serve an important purpose for your community, and that is in terms of the use that would be provided. Their evaluation and their investigation reveals and satisfies them that there is still a need and an opportunity to have a successful senior family housing development in their facility to be adjacent to the proposed residential homes. I'd like to first have Dennis Glacken come forward and provide, Mark Alexander to come forward and provide his testimony. Members of the board, I've given each a copy of the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint will be okay, good. Mark, would you please tell everybody, both the board members and the public behind us, who you are?
Hi, I'm Mark Alexander. I'm the Senior Vice President and Head of Development for Atria. I've been with the company almost 18 years. And I'm just going to tell you a few things about Atria. And I actually wanted to comment on a few things that have changed since I've last been here. So I feel a little awkward here with my back.
If you stand over here, you can look
Yeah.
sort of at everybody.
So our company today is 189 communities in 29 states and 7 provinces in Canada. That is different from when I last saw you all last June. The company has grown. We have over 22,000 apartments now. We are our products are independent living, which are for residents that don't need any care. Assisted living, which are for residents that need assistance with activities of daily living, and that's where we're licensed by the states that we operate in. And then memory care, which is a higher level of care for folks that are in secured units with memory issues. They may have Alzheimer's, they may have other mild cognitive impairments. And we are all private pay, and we are not a CCRC or a buy-in community. It's all rental. Little difference here too in the local market. when I was last here, we had Atria Center City downtown has always been there, and Atria Woodbridge Place out in the suburbs in Kimberton. We picked up a few new properties that we're managing for other third-party owners. That our presence in the area has grown, and quite frankly, looking to grow even a little bit more beyond this project. Our residents, assisted living there's what some people call a medical model in assisted living, and some people call a social model. We're more of a social model provider. We focus on lifestyle and lower acuity residents, and it's hard to read up these numbers, but up there, of our residents, 63% of them don't actually receive any care, and 27% do receive care, 10% are memory care. We're proud of our company and what we do for folks. We think we do it very well. And kind of going back to the map, we're really concentrated in major metropolitan areas. We're the biggest provider in the state of New York. We're one of the largest providers in the state of California and in Massachusetts as well. We're also proud of our commitment to developing and redeveloping in a sustainable way. We're proud members of the U.S. Green Building Council. We've achieved LEED certification, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and kind of the prerequisite for green building in 5 communities, and we have 5 that are currently in most of them are in later stages of development that we've submitted for that we intend to get certification on. We try to do that wherever we can. We believe in it. We've spent $266 million over the last 7 years on building green, and I've said to this board a year ago, and I'll make the commitment again. If we're fortunate enough to build this community, we will commit to a LEED certification. I can't commit to what level, but we will commit to get it certified. We're building a building right now in Foster City, California, that we've committed to build LEED certified. And that was a prerequisite for our development. The group that I've been working with and responsible for, we've done over $500 million worth of projects since we started in 2007. Really, these are just a few photos. Trying to keep it simple here tonight, but it's clearly a local business, and it will be here too. We the local architecture, obviously local staff, and that's what we pay attention to, and that's how we're successful. Even though we have national presence, we have wherewithal. It's a local business and always will be. And that's what we try to do. These are just examples. Cape Cod, this is in Marin County here, and this is out in Walnut Creek, California, just north of San Francisco. We try to, again, emphasize the local communities. Proud of these. These are all communities that our group has done, either ground up or redeveloped, and actually all LEED Silver, LEED Gold. They've all been very successful communities too. This is a lot of numbers on here, a little bit hard to read, but we've provided this before and simply said, so, thanks for getting that more into focus, Dennis. So down here, market classifications, you see it says good, equilibrium, nearing saturation, or saturated. And this is basically supply and demand dynamics is how we look at it in senior living. Over 75-year-old population within a 5 and 10 mile radius. Typically, 50 to 60% of our residents come within 5 miles, and then 70 to 80 within a 10 mile radius. That's true almost everywhere, perhaps besides New York City, where it's more like a 1 mile radius. So when you look at those populations and you look at the actual supply in this market, what you see is an extremely low number. Now, this is not different than what we talked about a year ago, but I do think, it's rare to see numbers this low, and I will kind of emphasize the point that Ross made. This is a need that your community clearly has. That's why the Masonic Village just built more units, which I've heard have already been leased up. I can't confirm that, but it's a market that needs more senior housing. This is again sort of a little bit hard to see, but we did some data that we have from our industry's National Investment Center for Senior Housing, where we actually track occupancies. We didn't have this last year. Put it in to basically also show yet another gauge of demand is the very high occupancies you see in the area, and you see it for a sustained period of time. It's yet another reason or support to why we feel strongly that the market needs more senior housing and that it's a good use. I'll just, in closing, we really feel like this is a smart growth opportunity for the Springfield Township. We are good community partners. That's what the business is about. And we hope we're fortunate enough to be able to build this building sometime soon. And but we think that this community needs this. This is really an example of what we would call just smart growth, because it's a low impact use, senior living, and low density on the rest of the project. A lot of open space. We're committing to build the building green, and it's kind of, we look at it as a win-win, and we hope you do too. So I'm gonna let Dennis talk about some specifics.
Dennis Glacken, our planner, will be next.
Good evening, members of the board. I have some slides that I'd like to show you regarding the planning aspects of this and the fiscal impacts of it, which I think you all have an interest in. The proposal, as Jim has summarized, is to amend the front 7.1 acres, to rezone that to institutional use, and be compatible with the uses that are on either side of it, the Masonic Village, the indoor nursing home, amend the institutional district regulations to add a definition of personal care, assisted living, provide yard setbacks for personal care, assisted living, and set the access standards due to the particular case here where you have two roads and you have a traffic signal and access not desired on Ridge Pike. And finally, to reduce the amount of density that's permitted in the AAA AQ1 while increasing the required open space. The 7.1 acres is shown in blue. This is Ridge Pike that runs from White Marsh Township through to the city of Philadelphia. Across the street is the D district, which has Eagle View. MU further down Manor Road. The area that's striped is the remainder of the property, which is where the AAA AQ or Squires Ridge development would occur. What has changed from before? Again, Ross kind of hit this. Masonic Village has been built. The access is relocated to Manor Road, with the driveway being closed on Ridge Pike that they previously used. We have a senior corridor along Ridge Pike. The proposed age qualified community has been reduced to 32 new units, plus the preservation of the mansion with 2 units versus 1 unit previously.
Dennis, what does age qualified community mean?
It means that one person has to be 55 years of age or older to reside in the community.
Next.
And I'll show you this in a little more detail when I get to the plan, but we've relocated some homes along Northwestern Avenue to provide single-family homes adjacent to some neighbors, increased the amount of open space next to the neighbors to 5 acres, and shortened the roadway. And again, I'll show you a plan in a minute. We've also changed units that were semi-detached into singles along that area. And as you all know, Ridge Pike has had certain improvements done with left turn lanes and so forth that John Yorick will talk about when we get to the traffic section. Just for reference purposes, this was the AAA AQ1 plan that was approved several years ago. This plan has 53 units on it, which includes 1 unit in the mansion. This is the area where the atria building is proposed along Ridge Pike, again on the eastern end or western end of the property, and you have the road pattern that runs through the site with a turnaround near Northwestern Avenue and the age qualified units. This plan had 52.4% open space when it was approved, and as I said, there's 53 units on the plan. This is the plan that was shown to the board in 2014 as a sketch. Again, the atria building along Ridge Pike, a large area of open space next to that, the area around the mansion, and the area down near Northwestern Avenue with open space.
Dennis, is there a portion of the property that crosses into White Marsh?
Yes, the light green area is in White Marsh Township. This plan in Springfield Township had about 67% open space, which included limited common areas near the units as well as what you would call traditional open space. This is the revised plan that we have prepared, and what we've done is try to increase the open space near Northwestern Avenue. This is actually about 5 acres now, and you can see how the turnaround has been shortened up compared to the old plan. So we've put single-family units next to the neighbors, increased this to 5 acres, The center portion has stayed pretty much the same and have placed 2 units in this area along the access road. The roadway is essentially the same other than the turnaround near Northwestern. The atria layout is unchanged. This plan has 68.6% open space. If you count some additional area around the atria building that was not counted before, such as along Ridge Pike, the open space is a little over 70%, and that's without counting White Marsh. So you have an extremely high amount of open space on the plan, and this was the sketch that we would go forward with if we were successful in a rezoning. Let's go through just some facts about the open space and the density. Currently, your AAA residential district requires 50% open space. The AAA AQ1 overlay requires 50% open space. Your design alternative has no specific open space requirement. Your cluster residential district requires 30%, and then the previously approved Squires Ridge plan has 52%. The sketch plan would go forward has 68% open space. So in terms of open space, I think it's hard to make an argument that there's not a significant amount of open space on the plan. The open areas and natural features are well protected, and there's buffers provided on the plan. Let's look at some density facts that always seem to come up. Your 2 districts that are the least dense in your township, the AA district and the AAA overlay, requires 25,000 square foot lots, which obviously are clustered under the AAA, but no additional density is obtained. That comes to about 1.74 units per acre. The allowable density in the AAA AQ district is 1.8% gross, 2.2% net. The amendment reduces the AAA AQ1 density to 1.15 and 1.3 net. So there's a reduction in the density. The proposed density of the age-qualified parcel, if you just take the 31 acres that's associated, 31.5 acres that's associated with the age-qualified parcel, the density there is 1.08 dwelling units per gross acre. This is low-density residential. It's just a tad over 1 unit to the acre. This is a context plan, which I think you've seen before. We've just updated to reflect the new layout, but it shows a major open space areas in this portion of the township. You have the Ace Golf Course, which of course is in White Marsh. This is the extension of the Masonic Village, this building in white, and the parking. The dark areas were the old Masonic Village building, so this shows the extension, the connection through Manor Road, through their driveway, the proposed atria building. Across the street, you have Eagle View, which is a townhouse community. You have a major open space portion in the front of the age-qualified homes, as well as the open space portion that we talked about along Northwestern, which of course abuts Fairmont Park. You have the indoor nursing home. You cross the line into Philadelphia, you have a shopping center, of course, some higher density residential single-family homes there. So you have a significant amount of open space in this area, both on this development, adjacent in Fairmont Park, and adjacent in White Marsh Township. We looked at the comprehensive plan for the township, which I know is fairly recent. You saw these first 2 parts before. This is in Chapter 7, housing. Seniors are recognized as an important group. Older residents that want to age in place, but are living with varying degrees of independence, will need new choices available in the future, which is what this development would provide. Land use action item 1.7, continue to provide for a variety of dwelling types that meets the township, the needs of the current and future residents of the township. And this was a new point that I was actually very surprised to see, but in the open space chapter, it says lands designated as public and private open space has increased between 1996 and 2010 from 376 acres to 623 acres. That's 65% increase. So your public and private open space, for a variety of reasons, has had a significant increase over the last 15, 20 years. Montgomery County Planning Commission comments, and this is from their earlier letter, where they basically said that the amendment is consistent with the county plan, that they actually supported extending the institutional district to include additional parcels along Ridge Pike and also to possibly extend it beyond the 7 acres requested. Financial revenues to the township and the school district. What we do is try and provide the township with information on what the likely fiscal impacts are, especially in a rezoning situation of the existing zoning versus the proposed zoning. In this case, we have an approved plan and a proposed plan. The township's overall assessments have grown by only about 1.2% in the last 4 years, by about $17 million. So your assessment base has been fairly consistent. The project assessed valuation just from this development would increase it by about $36 million. So it would be a major increase in the assessed valuation, which directly goes to the real estate taxes that the township levies, but particularly with the school district levies, which, as you know, has a much higher rate. Total increased revenues to the township annually at project completion is $232,000. Total increased revenues to the school district at project completion is about $1.2 million. These are annual numbers that will go as long as this project is in existence. So these are significant sources of future revenue to the township and the school district. In addition, there's a series of one-time fees for permits, the transfer tax from the TC family to the developers, and these would be in excess of $300,000. So this is like a one-time fee, series of fees. What financial cost are you going to incur? Well, the school district will get virtually nothing in terms of additional costs. We've put 2 school-age children in there for the mansion. Personally, I think it's highly unlikely that kids will be moving into that mansion as it gets converted into 2 units, but we put 2 kids in there for the mansion. Impact on township services, other than EMS services that would probably be provided, more so than a traditional development. The services are very limited. These people are not out and about typically. They're, they don't use the township services as much as a typical family would. Fiscal impact summary. You probably could follow along better on this in your booklets. What we've done here, and I can provide more detail or answer questions on it, is we took Springfield Township, the total revenues, total expenditures, and showed a net fiscal impact. Did the same for the school district, and then the total. For the total revenues, that's made up of a number of sources. You have obviously your real estate tax, you have earned income tax, you have transfer tax, you have fines, permits, fees, cable TV fees, funds from county, not so much county, but state and federal governments. So these are the revenues that you get. The expenditures, what we do is we look at what you're spending today to provide services, and we divide that by the number of people in the township and the employees in the township. And we come up with a number that says, all right, for the average person, you're spending, and I'm just going to pick a number out of the air, $300 per person. And then we apply that to the new community to come up with an expenditure side. Could it be a little higher, a little lower? Sure, it could be. But it gives you, we didn't want to, it's not fair to just show the revenues without the expenditures. If you look at that, you had the net township fiscal impact after the expenditures are taken out, and we broke it down by each function of the development: the age-qualified homes, the existing manor home, the assisted living facility, and the total to the township net is about $162,000 annually. We went through the same exercise for the school district, and their net is about $1,173,000, and overall the total net fiscal impact is about $1.3 million under the proposal in front of you. We then knew there was some, concern or comments about, well, yeah, but what about the approved plan? What does that do for the township? So we went through the same exercise. We have the plan that's before you, the Atria Squires Ridge plan versus the 53-unit plan that was approved several years ago. And in each case, you can see the difference: higher revenues with Atria, higher expenditures with Atria, and that is a function of the 125 people that would live in the community, in the Atria community, which we didn't discount their use of public services, although I think in reality it would be highly discounted, but we just kept them as 125, and that's why the expenditures are higher. School district, the same. The 39,000 is the 2 school-age kids in the mansion versus the 83,000. And what that 83,000 could be less than that, but you do have a provision in the ordinance that allows 20% of the units to be occupied by people who are not 55 and over. Our experience, Jim Nolan's experience, is as a practical matter, that doesn't happen because the HOA documents prohibit swing sets and things that would attract children. And so as a practical matter, it doesn't really happen, but we didn't want to be accused of not recognizing that fact, so we should put some expenditures in for the approved plan. You can see the difference to the school district. And at the end of the day, the net fiscal under the Atria Squires Ridge plan is about $1,336,000 versus $819,000 for the approved plan. So in summary, the ordinance amendments will provide needed housing for an aging population, as noted in your comprehensive plan. It provides a significant amount of open space on the site. It provides additional assessed valuation, which I think we can all discuss and maybe have different opinions on how much revenue you would get from earned income tax, because nobody really knows where everybody's going to live or what they're going to make. But I think the real estate taxes are pretty straightforward. And having a $36 million of assessed valuation, which is kind of double what you've been getting over the past few years, should be a significant help to you. The zoning is only being changed for 7 acres along Ridge Pike. The zoning for the remaining 31.5 acres remains unchanged, but with fewer units and more open space. And the stormwater management system will be designed to provide a minimum of a 10% reduction from today's peak runoff flow rates, and will infiltrate the increase in volume for the 2-year storm. And our engineer will have a few more engineering words on that than I'll provide. So they're the reasons we saw from both the planning, looking at various comprehensive plans, trying to give you an idea of the fiscal differences between the plans, and putting information out there in terms of open space and density, which again comes up not only here but everywhere, and every project has that question. So we wanted to just get all that out there. So with that, I'll turn it over to John Urick.
Great, thank you. John Urick is our traffic engineer from McMahon Associates. John, you did the traffic engineering for the proposed projects, both the approved 52 single-family plan and now the Atria and the 32 single-family plan?
Correct.
And you've also, have you been in touch with the county and you're aware of the improvements to Ridge Pike?
Yes, I have.
And that's been in conjunction with the engineers for both White Marsh and Springfield Township?
Yes.
And would you please take us through your slides and bring everybody up to date on the traffic impact issues?
Sure. Since we were last here, the Masonic Village did construct their access opposite Manor Avenue. It's a little dark on this picture, but you can see heading eastbound towards the city, they did restripe and provide a separate left turn lane into the Masonic Village. They mirrored that on the opposite side. There's a left turn lane now going into Manor Avenue. Those provided significant safety benefit to the intersection with traffic traveling along Ridge Pike. When it's not congested, they tend to travel relatively fast. And then a right turn lane was constructed heading westbound, and the existing right turn lane was maintained. So significant safety improvements and to the intersection, and those made the movements into and out of Masonic Village and Manor Avenue a lot easier for residents trying to do that. There are still congestion issues out there. You have the eastbound lane drop from 2 lanes to 1. That's still a constriction point. So the county is still moving forward with their project to fully reconstruct Ridge Pike. from Crescent Avenue to the city of Philadelphia. They will provide 2 travel lanes in each direction, getting rid of that lane drop. They will maintain the separate left turn lanes provided recently at Manor and Masonic Village, as well as the existing Barron Hill left turn lane. The project is funded, and the county did select their engineer, and preliminary engineering has started this fall. I spoke to the county a week or 2 ago, and they provided me with an updated schedule. They anticipate constructions to start 2019 with completion hopefully by the end of 2020, if not early 2021. So this is just a schematic of the county's sketch drawing. Again, it hasn't been engineered, but it does highlight the 2 travel lanes in each direction. It has the auxiliary turning lanes at the Masonic Village and Manor Road intersection, and they are looking to provide some sidewalk along Ridge Pike as well. So here we have the trip generation for the proposed facility. Table 1 shows the trip generation for the Atria 125 unit facility, as well as the age-restricted homes. Those are 32 homes, plus conversion of the existing manor home into 2 units, so 34 total units. What that will generate in terms of peak hour traffic, in the morning peak hour, the highest peak hour between 7 and 9, as well as in the afternoon peak hour, the highest hour between 4 and 6 p.m. In the morning, it will be 54 trips into and out of the site combined. In the afternoon, it's 48 trips into and out of the site combined. And based on the existing signal timings, that's about 1 to 2 trips per cycle length. So it's going to be negligible in terms of the traffic produced by these 2 facilities. Table 2 just shows comparison to the previously approved plan, and what we have in terms of additional trips generated from this proposal versus the approved plan is 15 more trips during the weekday morning peak hour and 20 more trips during the afternoon peak hour. Again, not significant. It's a drop in the hat compared to what the traffic that's on Ridge Pike. And again, that's going to be about a trip every cycle or 2. So it's not going to be noticeable at the intersection. So in terms of the operations of the intersection in the future, the county's Ridge Pike Corridor Improvement Project will provide significant capacity to the intersection. The traffic is not going to be adversely affected by the Atria facility or the age-restricted homes. The intersection is going to operate at acceptable levels of service, and the intersection will include the full build-out of Atria, the age-restricted homes, and as well as the Masonic Village project.
Thank you. Rick Stonebeck is our civil engineer. He's the civil engineer on the plans for the approved 52 single-family houses, and he's also will be the civil engineer, if approved, to do the Atria facility on the front 7 acres in conjunction with an amended plan for the reduction of the back residential portion to 32 single-family. Rick?
Yes, good evening. The slide before you shows our vision for the stormwater management system to be built on the Atria facility. As Mark Alexander mentioned, it will be LEED certified. Green Building Council standards will require us to do a lot of best management practices in order to make sure that the stormwater portion is sustainable. We envision no change to what we previously have designed for the existing pond, which will significantly reduce flow rates downstream. We have designed a very large bioretention swale and rain garden system to help improve water quality and to get infiltration into the soil to reduce the volume of water leaving the site. In addition, we're proposing underneath the parking lot, we're going to put in some seepage beds, which will also reduce the volume and improve water quality. And lastly, we want to take the roof water into tanks that would be buried and call that rainwater harvesting, which allows us to recycle that water for gray water and or irrigation of the landscape features. So that's the vision that we have for the stormwater system for Atria. The stormwater system for the Squires Ridge portion would essentially remain unchanged with fewer units. So we envision that at least a 10% reduction in peak stormwater rates from the site after the development. And we also think that in order to get our NPDES permit approved, we'll have to infiltrate the difference in the volume of runoff in the 2-year storm, which is the frequent storms that happened much more often than the big 100-year storms that we also consider.
Thank you. Our architect, Peter Schmidt. Peter, you've also been here before.
Yes, I have.
You're an AIA,
Yes, I am.
and you have done work for senior living, and you've done design work for Atria.
Yes, our firm has only done senior living for 46 years, going on our 47th now. We've done successfully 9 projects for Mark's firm, Atria, and a few of the ones that were up there earlier were a couple of ours. I was going to orient you a little bit on the site. We are going to share the roadway with Masonic and Legacy here. We're coming off the side here, and there was a question last time about the loading dock that's on that side, which would be facing Masonic home. We have a parking lot out in the front. We anticipate that the planning board and fire department will ask us for a access path around the building. I have 4 quick shots of and ideas on the outside of the building. It's 125 units, as you know. The range of size of units are somewhere for studios in the 500 square foot to maybe 800 square foot inside. This would be if you were in the front of our building, standing in the parking lot. One of the things our firm prides itself on is to make sure that we fit in with the community. And one of the things that we wanted to pick up on would be a stucco and stone manor type house of architecture. The other thing that we like to do is not have one plane of building, so we like to undulate the heights of the building. So you'll see in the front that we have 2-story, we have some 3-story. There's going to be a porte cochere in the front of the building. We like to kind of build up the volume of the building and try to make it look as residential as we possibly can, turning portions of the building where we can, so it's not just one big plane of building. This would be from the proposed view from along Ridge Pike. The porte cochere is in the front. There'd be a 3-story section in the middle, and on the right or the left and the right would be the 2-story sections. The other thing that we like to do is utilize dormers in the roof area. We found in the past very successfully being able to design some really nice units in the attics. A lot of us maybe remember or have houses that have attic spaces. Some might like them, some might not like them, but we find that they actually do sell very nicely. The rear of the building, we are going to take advantage of. There's a pond that would be out in the back that Rick had talked about. We have a 1-story portion of the building, and we have some 3- and 4-story portions. Again, stucco and brick, or I'm sorry, stucco and stone portions. And this is the east portion of the building, which has, starting from the left, would be 2 stories. This is where our parking lot was out and then would grow to 3 and 4 in the back. As we're trying to take advantage of the slope going down to the pond there. This is also a view from well inside our property line to try to give a portion. And I just have one more shot from from outside of our land and on our, there's quite a large vegetation that I don't think that would be much of a view from over there.
Thank you. That completes our presentation. The witnesses would be pleased to answer any questions that the board has or the public, and I would like to make a couple comments at the conclusion of everything, please. Thank you.
Maybe we'll take questions first from the board, and if you want to, Russ, you can designate which of your witnesses might be appropriate to answer those questions.
Will do.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I got a few here. They're scattershot. And Ross, I tried to guess who the fourth. First one's either for you or for Mr. Garrity, and that is, how do we ensure that if we do all this, that the plan gets built on the back is actually laid out the way it's laid out here?
I'll let Russ start. Go ahead.
We discussed this before. I think it's
I know
a
we
fair
did.
question, and there's no way to 100% guarantee it, because your approval of these zoning ordinances based on these plans would not be an approval of the plan. We would have to submit a fully engineered subdivision plan first to create the 7.1 acre lot and separate it from the balance of the property. And secondly, we would have to submit an amendment to the approved 52 unit plan to reduce it to 32. And thirdly, we would have to submit a land development plan for the atria piece. And that is not possible for us to do that as part of the zoning process, because you have to have the zoning in place before you go to that expense and make that effort. However, we have been here so many times on TV in front of all these people that we're telling you that we will proceed in accordance with what the zoning ordinance would allow. The zoning ordinance would prohibit on the back piece any more than the 32 units that we're talking about. The reason that the ordinance has been written and designed the way it is to give you the comfort of knowing that we can't get more than 32 units on that property. We know that we can do that because we already have the approved plan for the 52, and we know how much ground is left, and we know what the density is. We also know what Atria's desire is, and one of the things that I should point out, and I'm sure you recognize, is that of all the things that have changed and all the things that have stayed the same, Atria is still here. And they still want to be in your community, not only because of the need, but because they think it's a good place to be, and it's consistent with being on Ridge Pike and being in between the Masonic Home and the indoor nursing facility. So for all those reasons, I think that you would hopefully have more than sufficient comfort that what we are proposing will be submitted for approval consistent with those ordinances. I can also tell you that notwithstanding our being here, and notwithstanding that we have not as yet submitted the fully engineered plans, that work is underway. But there's a limit to how much we can do because we don't have the zoning yet. And if the zoning is approved, then we will promptly be back here. This is not a situation where you won't see us for another year. We're ready to move forward promptly with these projects. And I would hope that that would give you as much comfort as we're able to give you. We have no better way to do it, but to the same extent, your approval of these ordinances don't approve these plans. And we have to come back here and satisfy you and get land development approval, get an amended PennDOT highway occupancy permit. Everything that would normally be done, we still have to do.
Yeah, I appreciate all that. I just want to be clear that it's the 4 or 5 acres of open space that I worry about, because you could start moving the things. Density won't change and all, we're protecting all of that, but that's just, I mean, I know you know that's what we're concerned about.
Absolutely, but again, we're appearing before you, and although all of you won't be here next year, there will be members that will be here next year that heard the presentation tonight and over the last 2 years, and I don't think it's likely or possible that we would come in and do violence to that plan without a good reason for it. And right now, we are not aware of any reason why all that open space won't be created and why those houses and streets won't go where we show them.
Okay, and then I have, these questions are just sort of random. I think this one's for Dennis, and that is, oh no, well, I'll read the question, I figured it out. I said, what percentage of actual value is used in the assessment, but it's 52 or 62, I did the math. It's 56% is what you use?
Yes, 56%.
Yeah, I did all three of your numbers and they all came out the same, so.
Which is different from what it was before, which it used to be about 62%, so the assessment ratio has increased and probably will continue to decrease.
Okay, and then, while I have you up, the property tax is listed as only 52% of the revenues coming from the age-qualified homes, as I understand that, which is, I get that number from, the memo that Nancy wrote, the third one that says, with her correction of Brennan's number, that the age-qualified homes would generate 93,939 in township revenues, but only 49,000 of that would come from property tax. Are you with me? Do you have that memo?
The township,
The third,
Yes, I
the
do.
third bullet point. My question is why is, basically what this is saying is in the manor house, the atria and age qualified, the property tax is about half of the revenue that's anticipated. It's 52%, 41%,
Yes.
62%. My question is what's the other half, particularly on the
the
homes in the
other
back?
half is what you get your revenues from today, such as the earned income tax, fines, permits, fees, intergovernmental transfers. Looking at your budget, you get about half your money from the real estate tax and half from other sources. So these are consistent.
So you're
with-
applying that.
Yes.
And are you doing anything with the initial transfer tax?
That's in that 300,000 one-time revenue number.
Oh, I missed that,
mentioned.
okay.
That was the one time.
That's where it
And
should
then the other thing that'll happen is when Mr. Nolan is selling the houses initially, with the 32 houses, they'll probably sell in a year or two. So there'll
Mhm.
be a kind of a hit of transfer tax initially, and then you'll kind of settle into the normal
Right.
transfers as people move and so forth.
We're seeing that force right now. Okay, and then I think that's what I have for you. And then for Mr. Stonebeck, and this is a real easy one. Are there going to be fish in the pond?
Excuse me?
Are there going to be fish in the pond, or are there fish in there? I'm worried about mosquitoes.
The pond itself, the water that's in the pond will essentially be unchanged. We think we will improve the water quality.
Mhm.
We're improving the water quality on the atria facility with all of the BMPs that I mentioned. Also, on both sides of the pond, where the development water will enter the pond, we have what's known as a forebay. And
Mhm.
a forebay is a water quality feature that we put ahead of discharge into a stormwater basin to remove sediment and
Mhm.
other pollutants. So whether there's fish or not, I'm not familiar with that, but
I don't know whether there are now
Degradation
either.
of
I
the
just
water quality of the pond.
don't want swarms of mosquitoes either. And then the last question is for Mr. Alexander, and that is, one of the things that we were talking about this summer as we were trying to figure out a way forward was to maybe add density to the atria, make the atria building bigger, and then that would enable, through rough subsidy or whatever, Mr. Nolan to have less density in the back. And that was, as we were told, that didn't work for you, and I just was wondering why that was.
We did look at that. Jim and I spent quite a bit of time this summer and fall going through sort of a way to work through the feasibility on the project. And for a variety of reasons, really our ideal type of building was one we built with Peter Schmidt here in Cape Cod, is the 125 unit community. I think basically it just what I didn't say during my presentation is that we have looked at this as sort of our economic feasibility breaking point is where we are. So that's why we ended up where we are.
Okay, great. That's all I have.
Mr. Shaw? No, nothing.
I have no comments.
I have a couple. You mentioned that there's no playgrounds or anything of that nature that would attract children. Is there any thought that there'd be a park or a playground area for family use for visitors to the facility.
That, at this point, I'd say that would be something we'd discuss with the board during land development. I don't think we would, but I think that's something we could certainly discuss with the board further. There's areas where it could happen.
Can I jump in 1 second?
Go ahead.
If I could ask maybe Mr. Nolan, is there any thought to having any, and I believe this comes off of a question from Mr. Harbison last year, any of the open space that 68%, is any portion of that you would consider, not as a condition, but I'm trying to think your thoughts, as a public open space? Is there anywhere on the facility where that could be possible?
Using the existing open space that we have on the plan?
Yes.
As public open space?
Yeah, any of it.
We can talk about it, sure.
That was my follow-up to
Okay.
item
I mean,
2,
that-
whether it be on Northwestern Avenue.
That could be
Maybe
done, that could be done a couple of ways. One way would be to dedicate the open space, but then you'd be responsible for it, and you'd own it, and you'd have liability issues. Another way is to enter into an easement agreement where the public would have a right of access. If you look at the 2 apartment buildings that Home Properties built across the street from Lee Park, if you look in between those 2 buildings now, you'll see a public access way, and that's exactly what that is. It was an easement, and believe it or not, the public has the right to walk in between those 2 buildings to get back and forth to the train. So that is something that can be considered during land development if
But
that's
you
what
would, you would be open to that in some fashion? I can't, without putting a number on it right now, and then that's something we could work out at a later date.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Can I
ask a question similar to that?
But the only thing it could affect your percentages. We might have to look at all that kind of stuff. If
But
it's
it
to
would
be owned by the township, it wouldn't then be their open space, unless we work that out, and I'm sure they'd make us work it out.
Understood.
The easement.
So then looking at the plan as it is, and specifically that area in the back near Northwestern Avenue, big piece of open space, the way you would manage it now is, who would manage that and how would they manage it?
If it's owned by the developer, and it would then be owned by the homeowners association, it'll be formed to manage all the open space. And that open space would be the responsibility of the homeowners association. If the township wanted, and we agreed to grant an easement so that the public could have access to that property, then the homeowners association would have to maintain it, they would have to insure it, but it would be available for non-residents to go on. There's no present plan to fence it or to restrict anybody, so even without the granting of an easement or considering dedication of it, the public could still walk on it. I mean, usually that's what happens until somebody does something they shouldn't do and the homeowners association, wants to prohibit something.
I also noted there's a trail or some sort of walkway in that back part of the property at that same location.
That's essentially the trail that was part of the 53 unit plan, so that's.
Will that
we'll say
remain?
As far as we.
That'll remain?
stay.
So,
That was for the use of the horses?
It's
from
for,
the
it's
shores?
for
so the intention is to use it in a public manner anyhow.
That's what it was originally.
Right now, under the 52-unit plan, that is restricted to horse use only.
Okay. No, I think that they answered everything else I had.
Don, do you have anything?
Okay. Tom, you have any? No. What's the price for the houses, the 32 units? What's the price point?
We're projecting about $750,000.
And then, is there any opportunities for sanitary sewer connections to the residents?
That's usually something that we discuss during land development. It would depend on what the lay of the land was, it would depend on what the condition, it would depend on whether the adjoining property owners wanted access to public source. And that comes up frequently.
I know, that's why I'm
in any
asking.
project. Nothing's ruled out, obviously.
But
and
there's
we
an
have-
opportunity to connect. You would
It would
work
have
with
to
the.
be, it would have to be feasible, and it would have to be something that's requested, and then it would have to be engineering to be possible, and then we would consider it as part of land development.
And then Dennis, the figures you gave with respect to the revenue, they're all net, correct? 1.2 million to the school district per year, and you have it as 220 plus net to the township, or is that reduced?
The net to the school district was 1.173, and the
Okay.
township was 162,000.
162?
Yes.
And,
And
and you did say that, if I heard you correctly, that included a projection for income tax, business privilege, and
not business
No, it
privilege.
did
not business
No.
privilege, okay?
But,
Just income tax.
Earned income tax, transfer tax, again, the non-governmental, or the intergovernmental revenues that you get now, again, we just proportion out what you're getting now for the units in the township, and say, all right, these units will generate the same, which, again, could be a little higher, could be a little lower. The intergovernmental revenues are all over the place, as you know.
All right. Thank you.
That's all I know. Thank you.
Okay, well, I just had a couple, just to be clear, on page 15 of your book, there is designation, there's dark green and light green. Now, I'm taking it that the darker green is what is counted as open space, and the lighter green is not counted as open space.
We counted the darker green is, I can say what you would call traditional open space, common open space. The lighter green is limited common area that'll be restricted from development, but it'll be open space. These are spaces that are closer to the houses, but will still be open.
I'm distinguishing or trying to distinguish that as open space from green area. I mean, I understand that the two are different things. I'm just saying, if we look at these percentages, does this page 15 tell us that the lighter green was not counted in your open space?
It was counted.
It was counted?
It was counted.
So everything outside the walls is open space?
And the patios and the roads and the parking.
Driveways.
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of the percentages, there's no difference between the light green and the dark green?
Well, the percentages I gave you included both. There's certainly differences. I mean, there's obviously more dark green than light green.
There's way more. All I'm asking you is all the green area on the entire site counted as open space?
Not all of it. There's areas around, first of all, Plan 15, that's the old plan. If you go to 16, it'll be the same question, I think.
Okay.
There's areas around the Atria building and in the parking lot we did not count in any of those numbers.
Right.
But we counted the areas along the back of Atria. There's a significant area of green space in the front, which we counted. And again, what's colored white marsh was not counted in the percentages, but that's obviously going to remain green too.
Did the 213 plan evaluate the open space the same way you did it for the 215 in terms of what was included and what was excluded?
The only thing in the 215 plan, we added a calculation for some of the additional large chunks of open space around Atria that were not included before, but the limited common area, the dark green areas, they were counted the same in both plans.
So when you say that the 2015 plan has an increase, it's an increase over the same calculation that you did the last time we were here?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and second question is, do you anticipate there will be one homeowners association or two?
Why would there be two?
Completely different housing types?
We really haven't given thought to that, but I would assume that there would be one.
Okay.
The light green space around the houses, that development, as you see it, is permanent. No other improvements can be made, no hardscapes of any sort can be put to
Right, you can see.
increase impervious surfaces.
We've added patios or decks on the back of the units and did not include those. So we've tried to account for everything that
Maybe I didn't express it well.
could be there, and these are the units that were approved before, which
I
Jim
anticipated
the same
one or
units
more.
as before, so that's not going to change.
Thank
I think I asked my question badly, Dennis. When I meant two homeowners associations, are you anticipating you won't have a homeowners association for the Atria? The rental units, Atria will manage that area?
Atria will
Yeah,
own and manage that, yes.
Okay,
The property will be subdivided. Atria will have its 7.1 acres, and the project will have its portion. So there will not
Understood.
be a homeowners association including Atria.
okay, so the maintenance responsibilities for what I'll call the upper part of the site would be Atria's?
Correct.
Okay.
All trash pickup and stuff will be township or no?
For the residents?
Or the residential?
That would be, however, the township, do you have public?
I should say, are the roads dedicated to the township?
Dedicating the roads?
So no snow plowing,
No snow plowing, no road maintenance,
No trash pickup.
streetlights.
No trash?
That would all be
okay.
maintained properly.
That was my
Private
thing, because you
trash,
did say
yeah.
that would be negligible, and I wanted to see.
Right,
this.
and that was the point of all that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about buffering. Is there any buffering anticipated on the perimeter of the site, adjoining the other residential properties?
Yes, I don't have there was an approved landscaping plan for the 53 unit plan that had buffers along these areas, and I don't have that in the slideshow, but comparable areas would be buffered. As stated before, along these setback areas, there was buffers and landscaping provided.
In accordance with the township's?
Yes, just like, and that was the way it was approved before, so that will stay the same.
Yeah, because the houses are all different locations. How about questions? Do we have any more questions from the board?
I'm good.
Okay. Are there questions, and I emphasize questions only at this point, from any of the audience?
Question for
Sir,
you,
could I just get your name and address, sir?
Dr. Edward Kohler, I'm a township resident.
Where do you live, sir?
On Shepherd's Way.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question for the engineer regarding hardscaping and so forth, and it's a backup to Bob Gillies' question. Will there be restrictions about the houses adding sheds, hardscaping, additional parking for cars and so forth in the land development plan so that the impervious area will not increase, which would adversely affect your rainwater calculations?
Bless you.
Well, any construction would require a township permit, so if somebody ever came in to add anything anywhere in the township would,
Well,
could require.
you know, from normal housing construction, people go to Home Depot, they buy a shed, they go back, they put it in their backyard, and they never tell the township squat.
But it's not their
So I'd like
backyard.
to find out, is the answer in the homeowners association?
Yeah, the homeowners document,
Absolutely.
the homeowners document will prohibit that.
Thank you.
And the homeowners documents have to be submitted to the township, and the township has to approve them as part of the document package for the project.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Question for, on Mike Schweik, Lakeview Drive, as far as the parking area for the Atria site, if it is approved, is there any way to move that since you are dedicated to, having it a neighborhood appeal and it look like it blends in, the parking moved to the back or the sides? Since if you drive through there, you'll just see 65, 70 cars, as opposed to if it's somewhere else, it could be the people in the back can see it and not the local residents see it.
I'll start to answer that, and Peter can help me out. The property slopes as you go to the back, the property slopes as you go back from Ridge Pike. The front entrance to the Atria building is located in the front of the building. So we want to have parking so that you can park and go into the building. The other thing is that with the landscaping that would be proposed, and this is a conceptual view of that parking will be heavily screened. So it's not going to, and it's set back from Ridge Pike, so it's not like you're going to see a big parking lot with no trees in front of it. It'll be screened and buffered. This is a view along Ridge Pike.
Well, is there, but.
So the answer to your question, probably not, because of
The question was, with the whole Atria idea, was to keep it looking as a neighborhood idea. Okay, and to have a big parking lot in front would take that whole idea and throw that out the window. I mean, Springfield doesn't have any of that out there, and now they would have it with this idea.
Not necessarily. The Masonic Home has its parking on Ridge
That's not
Pike,
Spring Lake Township.
or it's not so much the township, it's the expanse of Ridge Pike and the properties adjacent to it. and/or nursing home has its property, has its parking. And in our humble opinion, we think it's more appropriate to have the parking on Ridge Pike, which is where people travel. That's less of the neighborhood feel than to put the parking on the sides or in the back, which would be adjacent to existing homes and future homes. So we respectfully disagree with that.
And just to say, one thing we've done before that we can look at, Peter and I can look at, is a berm. I mean, we've done that before to effectively eliminate some of the shed.
So there's no fence idea involved. It would just be maybe a berm, trees,
Huge.
whatever other landscaping.
I know.
There's no current plan to put a big fence on Ridge Pike.
Well, we understand your concern. That'll be looked at, if this zoning is passed, that'll be looked at during land development, and I'm sure that any expanses of macadam would be buffered and bermed and landscaped in a way to make it as attractive as possible, if the zoning's passed.
Another question would be in regards to keeping it as a neighborhood look, okay? Instead of going up, I don't know how far these plans are. Is there any way to go out to keep it low so that it would look like housing as opposed to an office type looking structure? I don't know.
I can probably answer that. I mean, I was just trying to get that point across where we have an undulation of, no, actually in the front. We have 2-story and 3-story in the front, and as you go around the other side, we're sloping down to 4 stories somewhat in the back, and we also on the right-hand side of that shot, that we just go back one. On the right-hand side, there's 1 story right on that right-hand side, and we also have 3 and 4 stories behind it. We try to build up the building so it's just not one flat plane of height.
Is this the actual look of the building? Or is this just some other building that you put on this screen?
No, this is
What
a
you're building?
concept.
Oh, it's a concept, so it's not exactly what you're building? Oh, so how do we know what we're getting?
Jeff's question again.
How do we know what structure? Are we getting brick? Are we getting this? Are we getting stone? Are we getting, how do we know?
I think all I could explain was we're gonna get stone and stucco.
Okay, well, if I can explain or try to explain that, because Jeff Harbison pretty much asked the same question earlier. There's really 2 ways you can do it, one of which is not in here, which is make the whole thing a conditional use, and then you can specify architecture and everything else. The second and more practical way is there's never been a plan designed yet in the history of the world that didn't need waivers from the Board of Commissioners, and that's where the commissioners have the opportunity to exert a little bit of influence on architecture, design, and everything else, if the overall zoning is passed. And land development, well, yeah, they have to go through land development, but basically, those kinds of issues, building materials are not in the ordinance. We've heard testimony about it, and I'm sure if this is passed and the commissioners don't get what's been represented here, there will be issues.
Okay. The other question, 7 acres on Ridge. So as much as the 7 acres of this property is, how much, I didn't see that or I didn't hear it. How much is actually the property, the parking and the roads for this 7 acres?
Everything that isn't in that 68%, is that correct, Mr. Glacken?
Yeah, this is the 7 acres. You can barely make out, there's a black line here, it's our property line,
Okay.
ridge, manor. So you can see the green areas, you can see where the buildings are, you can see the parking. That's the easiest way to.
Well, what I see is obvious, but what I don't see is actual how much hardscaping is going to take up the 7-point-some acres.
There's a limitation of impervious coverage in the ordinance that is not being changed, and that's 40%. So the maximum that we can disturb, or maximum that can be impervious is 40% of the 7.1 acres.
So, in other words, what you're saying is that there will be 40% of green. Is that correct?
No,
40% of
The other way
paving
around.
and building.
40% of paving and building in that 7.1. also you, Mr. Nolan said that it would be an HOA. Okay, would that be a gated property?
We're gonna have a couple pillars with gates that are not closable, so it'll be a sensitive place.
And then with that being said, if it is an HOA, as Eagle View has, we have restrictions to soliciting, and people generally aren't supposed to come in our neighborhood because we don't get any of the township public works
Services.
services. So is that going to be the same for you, where the HOA can decide if you allowed in there the local people to walk, run, or exercise and things like that, or is that how that will work?
Very similar, yes.
So basically then, it will not be accessible then to the residents.
Not accessible to the residents.
Right, because it will be a private property.
Oh, yeah, very similar to yours.
Right. So if it's a private property, even though you have all that open space, how is that?
No, we said that the 5 acres of open space that's down near Northwestern Avenue, that we would consider either dedicating or agreeing to permit access by the public.
So that's just something that's up in the air.
Look, if you wanted to cross Ridge Pike and walk into this development, I can't imagine anybody would stop you. But that's different from saying that this is all open space. I mean, you have the Atria residents and you have the rest of the residents of the community, and these are things that we'll be discussing with the township as we work through the homeowners association document. But what Mr. Nolan has says, it will be similar to your development. I didn't have any problem when I went to one of the, you live in Eagle View? I didn't have any problem when I went to one of your residents' houses for a meeting on this project a couple of years ago.
What's the ideology, not the,
Pardon me?
what happens, what can happen and what should happen?
Well, I just drove into the development and I went up and parked at Judy's house. I don't see her here. And we had a meeting in the living room. And
That's irrelevant to what I'm asking, I'm talking about across the street about that.
it's gonna work the same way that yours.
Yeah.
That's the.
We don't need a debate.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, what he's saying is that there'll be private roads and the HOA, in conjunction with the township, will decide how it's operated.
Yeah, and I know for a fact that the numbers, the question is about wage taxes that will benefit the township. If you work or live in the city, Springfield does not get any of that wage tax.
Okay, we're not at that portion yet unless you say, isn't that true at the end of your statement?
Right, exactly.
Only questions.
Right, so those numbers then, if that is true or not true, would that be true that those numbers will go down?
If all the people working in the development, Dennis, or half of them work in Philadelphia, how will that impact your numbers?
It won't, because we've already taken that into account. We're assuming that 80% of a number of employees who live in the township are already paying the tax, so we didn't add anything in there. If you live in Philadelphia, you're not paying it, but there'll be some people who don't live in the township who work there that will pay it, as well as the age restricted portion of those who have earned income. Some of those people won't pay it either, but some will. So we made some assumptions on that, but we definitely took into account the Philadelphia consideration.
And the Philadelphia and other townships who get that percentage?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's hard for me to say where everybody's gonna live.
Philadelphia's the only one that circumvents us.
And the earned income
Yeah,
tax
but unless
is not a huge number, so.
Oh,
Yeah, you pay
it gets
where you
taken
work.
out of, that's where you live.
The sewer, where's the sewer going? Is this
I don't know.
we don't know that yet?
I don't know that yet, maybe
No, we
Rick
can
does.
tell
You know where the sewer?
Same place their sewage is.
Yeah.
The sewage will
In the
go to
pipe.
an on-site
Give
sewage
him the
disposal.
pointer.
We'll get to the,
Gonna need a,
there's a sewage pump station proposed on the project at the same location it was proposed for the Squires Ridge project. That was previously approved, and the sewage is pumped up into a manhole at Northwestern and Ridge. So it goes into the city, and I believe there's an agreement with the city to receive it.
Correct.
So, Mr. next question, so the city is accepting Montgomery County's waste? into
Yes.
the-
It happens all the time.
Takes ours.
We don't have any treatment facilities.
No.
That would be the homeowners association, Mr. Nolan, that own that? That sewage treatment plant?
No, it's a
Yes.
pumping station. sir.
Yes, combination between Atria and a homeowners association.
And Atria also is the same
Yeah.
system?
And I think,
Everything pumps into the city?
doesn't your sewage go to one as well?
No.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Ours goes into us, our own station.
And it goes into the
So
city.
then
Where
goes
does it
into
go from
Philadelphia.
there?
And then it goes where?
Then it
pump
goes into the city.
They pump it into the city.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, sir.
It goes into Springfield pipes first.
Yeah.
Then it goes
And they
into.
charge us for that.
We're talking about two different things, transportation and treatment.
Get right in there.
There's a hand in the back, yes, sir. Name and address, sir.
Andrew Glendenning, I'm on Andorra Road. And, is stormwater covered in this hearing, or is that?
No, sir.
Further down the road?
He mentioned that, they
Well-
did mention it.
No, is stormwater concerns, is that for this hearing, or is that?
You could, well, I guess you can bring it up briefly here, but I think the applicant's testimony is that impervious surfaces have been reduced. So that's, should be theoretically less of a stormwater concern, but generally speaking, the stormwater design is the subject of land development plans, more engineering.
We're impressed with the building, the large atria, that's impressive. But I don't think there was any talk about the other homes further down the valley.
Down the valley.
Cul-de-sac.
They're not-
That's why we have a stormwater ordinance and a
That's already
township engineer.
Approved.
Okay. That's our concern.
We are.
Downstream.
Understood. Anyone else? Questions for the witnesses? Questions for the witnesses, not statements. Yes, ma'am.
What was the rental,
Give your name and address, just,
Sharon Parsons, Hopeswell Circle. The 125 units, what would be the cost to rent them? Is there any idea of what you would be renting for?
A range for a studio would probably be between 4,000 and 5,000. One bedroom between 5 and 6, and a two bedroom between 6 and 7. Then our memory care units would be higher.
Now, is that in all your developments, is that correct?
No, it depends on the market. In many developments, it's a lot higher actually in many jurisdictions.
there was another hand I thought back here. Yes, ma'am.
Adina Bryson on 15 West Mill. Is this the time to ask the commissioners questions as well?
No, ma'am, just those witnesses.
So, how about like what our planning commission said, what you discussed in the beginning?
You can ask all of that of those witnesses if they discussed it, and if not, you're, in about a few seconds, you'll be able to
Okay.
make any statements you want.
Then let me go through these and find out. Can you, tell me in the back, is it age qualified or age restricted?
The zoning is age qualified, and the ordinance permits 80% of the unit, requires that 80% of the units have at least one person that's 55 or older, and the balance of the units do not have a restriction.
Okay, and then you only think 2 school-age children are going to be in 30-some odd homes?
We don't believe there's going to be any children in this development. It's basically a 55 and older community. It's not designed for children. It's not expected that there'll be a lot of children. We don't expect any.
And what size is the house? How many bedrooms?
2,900, 3-bedroom.
So there's 3-bedroom homes, but no children.
I live in a 4-bedroom home that Mr. Nolan built for me in Marion Hill in West Conshohocken. You drive by it all the time, and there are virtually no children that live there. There's no school bus that comes up into the development, and I have 4 bedrooms, and the only time I get to use them is when my grandchildren come. They were all there for Thanksgiving. So other than that, it's not a family environment. It's not conducive to having kids running around in the neighborhood. Just not that kind of a development.
Most of the time, the use is sometimes 2 master bedrooms, and the other is an office.
So at this point, the plans have no public open space, is that correct?
Right now, the plans show open areas, and the commissioners have asked if we would make 5 acres of that available to the public, and we said we would. And that would be something that would be dealt with during the land development process.
And with your numbers that you have there, what you're calling open space is any portion that is not paved, is that correct?
No. What Mr. Glacken explained was that there were certain areas that were green that were included in his open space percentage calculation, and other areas of green, some of the lighter green, that were not. But the two big open space areas are the area behind Atria and the area adjacent to Northwestern Avenue.
Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Is that what you stated? So what areas of green space weren't counted in the open space?
I thought he already answered that, but Dennis, would you do that again?
I'm confused. It was confusing, sir.
Okay.
Everything you see colored green, other than the whitewash section, we counted as either open space, limited open space, or open areas.
So
Because the institutional land doesn't have an open space requirement, so it's areas that aren't being built upon, such as in the back, that was counted as open lands. We did not count areas like right around the building of Atria, we didn't count the courtyard, we didn't count the areas in the parking lot. So there's some additional green area, but again, we're trying to fit these into township nomenclature in terms of their ordinances and what some townships call it green area, some townships call it open space, some townships call it greenway lands.
But all this area here, like in between the houses in here?
Right, the light green areas.
And in here, you included all of that?
We did. In the 68% number, there's a 60% requirement of open space, which would be the dark green, which we also meet. But we're trying to, people have asked us, how much open space is here, and that is open space. It's not, it's open space, it's green. I don't know what else, it's as simple as that.
Dennis, none of it includes the whitewash portion.
Yeah, that's another 2 point.
Well, that's not in Springfield.
Oh, it's still a parcel of land on the map, but Dennis, my question is, that's not included in your calculation.
Correct, right, there's a number on there, but it's not included in the numbers I was using earlier.
And it's all non-buildable space.
It's non-buildable at the end of the day with the HOA restrictions. Part of the land development plan will be an open space plan that'll look very much like this, and those areas will be restricted from development. They won't be allowed to have sheds, they won't be allowed to have swing sets, whatever else you might think, those swimming pools. So those areas are gonna stay the way they are. And this being a built community like that, these are the kind of restrictions people buying here expect. They don't want their neighbor putting a shed in the back, and that's gonna be prohibited in the document. So what you see in terms of the building, the parking, is what you get. Could the township or the planning commission say, yeah, we want a couple more parking spaces? Sure, that's possible during land development, but it'll be a couple more spaces. It's not gonna be a huge number. So we provided for guest parking. We have 2-car garages. We have room for 2 cars in the driveway. So potentially there's room for 3 to 4 cars on each lot, in addition to areas for guest parking.
I would be curious to know if you had the number, what the open space percentage is without the light green.
I do, but I can't read it off there. I'll have to look it up for you.
I appreciate it.
Okay, let me, I'll get back to you on that one.
All right, let's ask some other questions while we're waiting for Dennis. Yes, sir.
Walter Flanton, 249 Northwestern. If you dedicate 5 acres, then we, the township residents, pay for the upkeep, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Any idea how much that costs?
Keep it?
Yeah.
That's what you do with it.
Yeah, Jim just said it depends what you do with it, but most instances I've seen is where a community wants the ground dedicated and then they try to find somebody to maintain it, like the Natural Lands Trust. But those organizations don't want to take dedication of small portions, and 5 acres would be relatively small in their mind without it being capitalized. So they would want a fund created for them to maintain it, and I don't think they would take 5 acres. If the township wants to have the public have access, the best way to do it is to have an access easement agreement between the developer/homeowners association and the township, and then the community can access the property. So you get the best of both worlds, but you don't get the negative of ownership and the expense. You'd have to insure it, you'd have to maintain it, you'd have to cut the grass, and it's better to have an access easement for recreation.
So if you dedicate it, then the township and the taxpayers pay for the upkeep.
Correct, but what
But
I'm.
if you just have an easement, then the homeowners association
Correct,
has to
but
pay
you
for it
still.
so that everybody else can use it.
But everybody else can go to it.
Got it, makes sense.
Just, I can answer the lady's question. The open space and open lands, which is the dark green areas, is 55.75%. And that includes the age-group portion as well as the age qualified portion. The limited common areas, 11%, 11.4%. So if you took that out, you're looking at like 55.75 overall.
And the requirement is 60?
The 60 is on the age-restricted portion, which would be, because we don't have as much open space, obviously, on the age-group piece. That's why the number is 55. If you just did, I think I have that number. If you just did the age qualified section, it's about 66%. I'm sorry, that's not right either. That includes the limited count. It's over 60, that's all I can tell you.
It's over 60.
It'll have to be under the ordinance, so.
That doesn't make sense.
As opposed to this.
Just to try to, if I can just rephrase that, the age-restricted lower portion of the site has a higher green area or open space to make up for the less open space or green area on the atria portion of the site. So depending upon where you draw the subdivision line, you would change the numbers.
So this property is going to be subdivided no matter what into two different deeds, basically?
I have
Is
no
that what
idea.
you're-
I don't know
Is
yet.
that what the
Yeah,
vote is?
The atria, a piece will be subdivided to create a lot for atria to build its facility, and the balance will be the residential units, which cannot exceed the 32 based on the draft ordinance.
So would it be possible, I guess this may be a question for the commissioners, you can tell me, I have to ask it later. But would it be possible to define the atria? I'm confused as to what might happen tonight, I guess, in terms of if we don't know where that line is gonna be drawn, then what are you really voting on?
We understand, but the line is never gonna be drawn in a way that makes an illegal property.
I understand that, that's not actually my point.
It hasn't been subdivided yet, and it will not be permitted to be subdivided in a way that makes either lot illegal. Which does answer your question about how do you know what the open space is gonna be, because we know it's never gonna be illegal. It's gonna be consistent with this ordinance, or it's not gonna happen.
So would it be possible, I guess, to so it won't be possible to have less than 60% open space on the atria portion of the land, period, after the subdivision? Is that what you're saying?
If the atria portion of the property is however many acres, the ordinance will control how much open space has to exist on that portion of the property, or the line, the subdivision line won't be permitted to be drawn in that location. So they'll have to move the line till they hit the open space requirement.
But doesn't that change the density of the back?
And it doesn't change it won't change the density because we've got an offer here of 32 units. What it'll change is the percentages of the open space on either side of the line based upon how the line moves.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, because it does make sense if you think about it, because you're mixing density and open space. Let's not do that. Let's say open space. If you move the open space line this way, then this side gets more open space. You move it this way, this side gets more open space. That's all it is.
I guess I'm
Now, if you
worried
bring
about
in
where-
density, that's another issue.
Yeah, where those 32 units are able to be based on where that line changes is my concern. So you're right, I am confusing, I'm not
Those two.
confusing the two, but I'm
Mixing.
concerned about
I understand.
the effect of one on the other, because it does have a huge effect on that.
Kurt. Question, Brendan.
Yes, absolutely. I think I actually could lend some, this is Brennan Prine, 265 Northwestern Avenue. Might be able to lend a little clarity and ask a question at the same time, so I could direct this to Dennis, perhaps. You were talking about the dividing lines between the two lots. It's my understanding that when I read the proposal for the zoning map amendment, that is stated very specifically, as surveyed out, talks about, you know, where the line's gonna go,
Right.
from point to point to point, and that specifically is the piece of ground that's being talked about for rezoning, the map amendment being changed. Is that correct, Dennis?
I don't disagree with you, but what we're talking about here tonight is not a subdivision line, it's a zoning line.
Correct, but for the zoning purposes, that is exactly what we're talking about, rezoning. So in
Yes,
that
that's
sense
correct.
of the word,
That's
that line's
correct.
not gonna
It's
move.
based on the other side of the line.
So just, that was a clarification on the question. Thank you.
Mm-hmm, got it.
I think the one there behind Brennan had
Is there another question? We thought there was one more.
Yeah, I was
the man, gentleman right there with the blue shirt.
I'm gonna pass.
He's much good at this. Okay.
So the next question would be, I guess, directed to Mr. Knoll, with the footprint of the 32 homes, does that just include the brick and mortar structure, or does the footprint have a buffer around each property? In other words, when each property is deeded, is it deeded for the brick and mortar, or is it deeded for an area that buffers the brick and mortar per property?
Deeded to brick and mortar.
Brick and mortar.
They're
So-
called footprint lots.
What's
Means
that?
the footprint is the lot.
Right.
Fee simple.
So, in other words, then, the footprint of those homes is only the house, and that's it. The rest would be common ground.
I think so.
Yes. The house, the driveway.
Understood. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Elizabeth Lamb, 249 Northwestern Avenue. I came tonight to see, you know.
This is gonna be a question, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
this is for Mr. Weiss. Why we're back here again after we went through everything. So I listened to you, Ross, in the beginning, why we're here. And basically, it was because what the Masonic Home has done.
Is that the question?
Why are we here since the Masonic Home has really nothing to do with your development?
I don't think that's a question.
Well, no, I mean,
But I'll be more than happy
it's a
to.
question, but I think it was answered
Yeah, it
repeatedly at
was.
the beginning, but I guess we can ask it
There's not
again.
one reason why we're here. It's a lot of things that all taken together explain why we're here. Not one thing. So it's not just the Masonic Home, it's not just Ridge Pike, it's not just that Atria wants to be here, it's not just that we've redesigned the plan, that we've reduced the number of units, that we've created that 5 acres on Northwestern Avenue. It's all of those things together. The totality of the circumstances, not one thing. It's all of them together.
I am having a feeling of deja vu. How about you?
I'm not having a feeling about deja vu or Groundhog Day at all, okay? And between the last time and now, a lot of things have changed, so.
Okay, if there are other questions? Okay, seeing no more questions, now we switch to
I have questions.
questions of Mr. Weiss's
My name is
witness.
Valentine Gorski, 15 West Mill Road, Flowertown, Pennsylvania. Question number one, what if the homeowners association changes the rules in regards to age qualification in the future? Will school-age children be able to move into the area at that point?
The homeowners association cannot change the rules because the only party that can change the rules or the township if they were to amend the zoning ordinance to remove the age-restricted qualification, which we asked them to do a couple years ago and they wouldn't do. So the homeowners association,
that.
the homeowners association
Never asked for
cannot
that.
change the zoning.
Okay. Also, in regards to possible children, I know you seem to think that there's very little possibility. I have friends who are well into their 50s and 60s who have school-age children. So I feel it's quite possible that there will be school-age children in this development. My question is, are buses able to get into this area? And B, are there sidewalks for children to get to a bus stop on Ridge Avenue? Should there be even one school-age child in the development?
I want to answer part of it, yeah.
You know, Dennis is going to answer part of it.
Sorry.
The ordinance restricts the school-age children. They can only live there for 3 months a year. They can't live there as permanent residents. So there's a restriction in terms of them living there. They can't. There's a sidewalk in the development that runs up to Ridge Pike along the verbiage there.
I thought there was a percentage that didn't have to be.
There's a 20% that can be sold to people under 55. You still have the
Oh, you still have the child.
You still have the child
Oh,
restriction,
okay.
but if you're 53 and would like to live in a community like this, that's designed to accommodate people like that.
Dennis, that's a federal law, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
Federal, the 20% is federal.
Yes, it's in the federal, it's part of this whole concept came from the Federal Fair Housing Act that allows an exemption that you can restrict housing to elderly, non-elderly people. That's where this comes from. And within that legislation, it allows this 20% exclusion, which the township recognizes.
So what is the difference between the age restricted and age qualified?
Age restricted has the restriction of the 55. Age qualified would be if we were here and the ordinance was different, and we just said, well, we're gonna market this to people who are 55 and over, but anybody can live here, but we're gonna market it, we're gonna design the units, and only they're gonna buy it, but there's no legal requirement, whereas here there is because of the ordinance and because of the HOA documents.
I am confused. Is this age restricted or age qualified?
It's age restricted. The ordinance.
And are the developers today asking for the back portion to be changed from age restricted to age qualified?
No.
They're
That's
not.
not part of the application. The only thing that's changed.
It's age restricted at this time, and nobody's asking for a change from that at this time?
Correct.
Okay.
The only change in the back portion is to reduce the allowable density and to increase the required open space. And that's the only change in the back portion that's being required by these amendments.
All right. I have another couple of questions in regards to the atria portion of the property. In regards to the other gentleman who was asking about parking, would it be possible to build the parking underground as opposed to above ground so that it wouldn't be visible from the street or to the neighbors?
We haven't looked at that, and I don't
No,
think
and
that's
that's also
gonna be
would be an
feasible.
incredibly expensive
Yeah.
proposition to put the parking underground, so the answer is no.
Okay. And the other question I don't want this to seem like a statement, but I'm concerned about the change in the setback from, I think it's 75 feet to 50 feet. And I'm wondering why Atria is asking for a change in those setback ordinances. Because that will affect the entire township and all of the land that is zoned this way for institutional use in the entire township. So I'm very concerned about that change, and I would like to know why Atria is requesting that change.
I'll be happy to answer that question in a second.
We looked at the other properties in the township that are zoned institutional today. And these include properties like the Morris Arboretum, Springfield High School, this township building, South College High School. Virtually all of them are developed. We're not changing the
No,
amount.
they're not. They're not, you could sell any one of those properties, knock down the existing buildings and put in houses.
Sure, and just like houses
Or
can get knocked down.
different buildings with larger
You're right.
footprints.
You're right.
So to say that they're developed completely is absolutely false.
No, they are developed.
To a small percentage.
All right, hold on.
completely.
Mr. Garrity is not going to allow you to have an argument between
No,
yourselves.
I'm not, but
So
I'm
if you
also
would-
concerned that we have a
That's
camera.
false,
Right.
sir.
All right, and if you want to disagree, everybody's gonna get a chance to talk, so you don't have to argue with anybody, because you're gonna get a chance to talk all by yourself. So let's be polite to the people who are trying to watch on TV and who are trying to hear, and you can ask the questions, but I'll ask you if you would, Dennis, and your folks generally, to give the answers this way to the board, so that people can hear.
Currently, most of the properties are already developed in the township, and we went through this before, the Arbus Arboretum, Springfield High School, South College High School, Township Building, Chestnut Hill Lodge. These are the buildings that are currently developed as institutional uses. The two factors that most affect intensity of development in an institutional district are the height and the amount of coverage. None of that's changed in this provision. There are changes in the setbacks that are particular to the road design, the fact that we're on Ridge Pike, and the attempt initially was to try and keep the institutional lot as small as possible. And that's why the proposal with these minor amendments to the setbacks were required. But the areas that really regulate intensity are not being changed.
I think the question was.
No, let's just ask, let the gentleman ask the question if you want to. Go ahead.
I want to know why you have asked for a change in the current ordinance to make the setback smaller. And if I understand your answer, it's because you want to make the atria lot smaller, so that you would then therefore be able to develop more buildings in the back, or you would make it more profitable. I still don't understand your answer as to why you want to change the setback ordinance, other than you want more profitability out of this. I don't see that it benefits the community in any way, shape, or form, and I would like that explained how it would benefit the community to have those ordinances changed. Could you explain that, please?
This is a statement.
It is.
No, it's a
Okay.
question. How would it
Well,
benefit the community?
it's a statement at the end of which you put a question mark.
Well, I understand, but
Okay.
that's.
All right, well,
that's
here's
how it works.
here's the answer. That is this gentleman's view of the project. I'm hoping that you would have a different view. And we did have an atria, they have a design, they have a program as to how they build their buildings and how they manage it. We had an issue, again, as Dennis said, with not only Ridge Pike, but also Manor Road. And in order to fit the atria building in the property without having to turn it, recognizing that there's a limit on the width of this property as you look at it, we needed those setbacks. And the gentleman's concern about the profitability and the balance of the property, I mean, that's the objector's argument all along. So that's an argument that they can make to you. I think that between Dennis and I, we've answered the question. Thank you.
Sir, I withdraw my.
I'll tell you what, first of all, sir, could you stand up so we could hear you?
Certainly. In terms of profitability, I completely withdraw that part of it, completely. I apologize. I do ask the question, how does changing the setback benefit the residents of Springfield Township?
Okay, good question. And the way it benefits the residents is you get the atria use. You have the Masonic Home Senior Living, and you have the Andorra Nursing, and you have the proposed atria use that's confined by the width of that property. So the way the reduction in the setback benefits the community and you is that when you reach my age, you will have a place that you could look to. When your parents reach that age, they will have a place. There's a need that's been identified by Mark Alexander for the community, and that's how, in our humble opinion, it benefits the community. I fully respect that you don't agree, but that's our position.
Instead of changing the entire township, why can't you just rotate the atria building so that it is not as wide and is deeper?
Because we are not changing the entire township for the reasons that Dennis gave, and because this is the proposal that we are presenting to the township for the property to front on Ridge Pike and not have its side on Ridge Pike and have its front on the access road. That just doesn't work that way. If you just look at it, you can see the width. You also have the lay of the land, which was pointed out by both the architect and Dennis. The property slopes from Ridge Pike back, and this is the way it's been recommended that it be designed.
Like it or not, sir, that's his answer, that's fine, and the board will decide which position is appropriate. Now, are there any other questions for Mr. Weiss's witnesses?
I do have some completely unrelated to what I spoke about before.
Go ahead, sir, just stand up if you don't mind.
Yes. Are the revenue amounts that you've put forward in terms of taxes and whatnot, are they based on 100% occupancy of the Atria facility and 100% occupancy of the proposed development behind Atria?
The houses, whether they're occupied or not, would still be paying the real estate taxes. They'll be billed as they're sold. The Atria building will be assessed if there happen to be empty units at one point in time, and there's always a few empty units. The assessment doesn't change.
But in terms of earned income tax and tax revenue, the empty units would in fact lessen the proposed.
We're not assuming the Atria residents are paying their earned income tax. The time that if a house in the age-restricted section was empty for some period of time, correct, there would be no earned income tax for those couple months or whatever it might be.
And if the Atria facility was only occupied at 50%, say, then there would be 50% less employees who would be paying less taxes into the township. Has that been taken into account?
We did not assume that the building was 50% occupied.
Well, I chose that as a random number. I said less than 100 was where I started.
Yeah, there's minimal tax on the earned income taxes because, as I explained, many people who live in Philadelphia, many people are already paying it in Springfield Township, so that number is not a big number. If there's, we assumed it was filled or very virtually filled.
We understand. We understand your point also, sir.
Thank you.
Sure.
And one more. Mr. Nolan, with that being said, are the properties sold or being marketed yet?
Nothing's been sold.
Nothing?
No.
Zero?
Zero.
And is there a marketing company?
Yes.
And are they in business
What do you mean?
to sell the property?
To sell which property?
The 32 or however many
Yeah,
houses?
Mr. Nolan is a well-known,
I
very
understand that,
reputable.
but as far as this property is concerned, are there any sold as of yet? Because
No,
you said
they're not
within a
sold.
year
Is
you-
anybody here that's interested in these properties? Any people here that are interested in these properties? Okay, there are people that are interested in these properties, and they stay in communication with Mr. Nolan because they would like to move to Springfield Township and or be in this type of house instead of the house that they're in right now. But nothing has been sold because we don't have an approved plan. But are we answering questions, and could you call that marketing? Yes.
Okay, because you did say within a year, I thought I heard in the conversation that this
Okay.
thing would be.
No,
would be built.
we understand. They could sign agreements to sale if they want to. Nothing illegal about that right now. But that'd be kind of dumb because it isn't zoned for that use yet. But there's nothing illegal, bad, or even fattening about that. They can do as they wish. But they're at their own risk.
So if it doesn't, they don't sell, we don't get any revenue.
No, I don't know how the property would be used if they don't sell, sir. I don't know. But we're only here about zone at the moment, only zone. Now, I think we're finished on that side of the case, and now we will let those who, first of all, Ross, do you have any other witnesses, anything?
No.
Thank you. Okay. Now, we'll go to, does anyone else wish to speak for or against the application?
Yes, I'd like to speak for the application.
Okay, well, let's do 4 first. Let's do all the 4s first, and then we'll do all the against.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Edward Kohler. I'm a resident here in the township, and I'm a licensed professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And based on the limited viewpoint that I got tonight, I didn't have the handout material to review, but based on the developer's presentation, it's my professional opinion that the development is in keeping with its two adjacent uses,
And for that reason, it should be given good consideration from this board. The residential areas in the rear are going to be buffered well, again, speaking to the developer's good intentions. And I'm very familiar with the Masonic temple, Masonic home adjacent to that. I've looked at that community, and this would be a good addition to that coming next to it. In addition, the developer has agreed or is intended to do a 10% reduction in stormwater management, which would be a benefit to the downstream homeowners that may have experienced some flooding now. Would be to benefit, to their benefit and to the township's general benefit. And my last comment would be that that they're going to harvest rainwater and use it for gray water within the atrium building, also a very good design element for the township, and hopefully a guiding policy for other developments within the township. So for all of those reasons, this board should consider approval of this development, the change in this zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else to speak for the application?
Yeah. Robert Korn, the address is 3052 Toledo Drive in Lafayette Hill. That's in the White Marsh Township. Want me to step forward?
I do.
Get royalties.
Currently, I live in White Marsh Township on DeLeo Drive. We've been there since 1982. About 8 years ago, I expressed an interest to Jim Dolan in his project, and I followed it ever since then. I've watched the ups and downs of this project. We want to stay in the area. We're currently in White Marsh. DeLeo Drive abuts Andorra Road. It's a cul-de-sac that cuts into Andorra Road. So the Masonic Village, we're in the backyard of the Masonic Village. And we have rainwater issues from the Masonic Village. Of course, that's a concern. This project, we think, is incredible. We think it's a wonderful benefit to the township. We support it wholeheartedly. And the reason is this. There really is nothing else for people in my age bracket. Whitpain Farms is in Bluebell. It's an older community. It was Jim Nolan's community. It's a fine community, but we wanted new construction. We didn't want to move to the main line because we have a daughter, divorced with 3 children, living in White Marsh. We want to stay in the area. We want to be accessible to the city. I told Jim that the homes, if he developed the homes right on Ridge, given the expansion of the Masonic Village, the retirement or nursing home next to it, we had no interest. So the atria fits the use of Ridge along that stretch, the institutional use. We don't object to that type of use. We love the property. It's a beautiful piece of ground. We've already targeted a site toward the back. One concern I would express is the idea of public space in terms of security. So it would depend upon where the public space is located. And we would not want it to intrude on the townhomes that are going to be built in the back. One interesting analogy is there's a creekside development on Stetton Avenue near Joshua Road. And I think your firm may have been involved with that, Jim, to some extent.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. My understanding is that the office building has not impacted overall the sales of townhomes. It's not a community that we have any interest in because they have 1 unit with master bedrooms on the first floor. It's not well laid out. It doesn't suit our purposes. This does. And we think there's a real demand in the area for over 55 housing for people like us. So we support it wholeheartedly. And if anyone has any questions of me, I guess they could ask me. I'm here.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else wish to speak for the application? For. Yes, ma'am. Name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Janine Nelson, 2106 Pennsylvania Avenue. I just want to thank the presenters tonight for a thoughtful and very patient explanation of the plan. I thought they did a really good job showing a good faith explanation of what they're proposing. I also know it's very hard to answer every considerable variable like earned income tax and all the things that you can't control. So I want to thank you for that. As a taxpayer in this township, I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to increase the tax base, to bring that $1.2 million into the schools specifically. I think keeping our older community members inside of Springfield Township is a benefit to all the families in this township. And I wanted to say that I think it's a much needed facility, and it's very important for us to keep the community members who've spent years living, raising their families in this township an option to stay here and keep those families intact. So I'm very much wanted to speak out for this proposal, and I hope that the board does the right thing and approves this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Yes. Yes, you, I'm sorry. Jean. Joan, I'm sorry.
Joan Parsons, 37 Hawkswell Circle. All I can say is that wow, wow, wow. And the reason I'm saying that is I'm 67 years old. I've been in this township for 40 years. I am not alone. There are so many of us that would actually like that. 55 and older, and the atrium. My last 10 years of my life, I could see myself there. Everything that was presented here, I think, is really good. I can see there's a lot of green. The 55 and older community, we were looking at one of those, and we would have to go to Montgomeryville. There's nothing in Springfield Township. The atria in the front is spectacular. I mean, I've been to the Sunrise, which is a similar place where, you know, people can go, and what that construction looks like is absolutely beautiful. I hope you approve the change. You know, I think that you will work with the homeowners around the perimeter of that, as you did with most of the other developments. I was on Susan Circle before, where there was 3.5 acres that was going to be, that was finally, 7 homes were built, and there was a lot of opposition from the homeowners around there, but in the end, it ended up being a beautiful place, plenty of trees, plenty of everything. So I really think that this would be good for our township. We're building a new complex for the police and the library and everything there, so every little bit of revenue we can get in our township is really important. And it's really important. There is a need. I work for a doctor's office in this township, and there's thousands of us age 50, I'm 67 and older. And I really think you should approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Anyone else for the application?
Good evening. Joel Clock, 309 Paper Mill Road. I am in favor of this. Thank you for the presentation. Over the past couple months and weeks, I've taken the time to see what both Atria and the residential plan behind it was going to offer for this township. And I know a lot of work and consideration on behalf of the board has gone over this for the past couple of years. In looking around, I'm one of the younger people in here with children. To dovetail what Ms. Paul Nelson spoke of, I think this is a very significant opportunity in terms of income for the school district, as well as the township. But the numbers I hear in terms of what can influx to the school and what we're working towards in building the schools with our growth of young people moving in, I think this is a beneficial tax income base that has to be considered, and it's an opportunity that doesn't come around that often in Springfield Township to a number of that size. So I'd ask this board to consider it and go ahead and approve the zoning hearing, see if we can move forward with this. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, now we're going to switch then to people who would like to make statements against the application or just make statements in general. Brennan. Up here, Ben, please.
Hi, my name is Brennan Prine, 265 Northwestern Avenue. As you know, I've been someone who has helped to organize the local neighbors who are in the vicinity of the property. And as in the past times, we have organized ourselves such that I would like permission to show about 7 slides and invite 3 other people besides myself from my neighborhood to speak to different portions of the presentation. It'll take about 15 minutes overall.
I don't think,
Spoke
we've
with Tom
already
about
seen
that.
a lot of PowerPoint already, so we don't have any problem with the PowerPoint. And I'm sure you're not gonna act like an attorney when you introduce those other witnesses, but we'll.
No, I'm just basically, we've organized
That was a
ourselves so
joke,
that we've
Brett.
got one after the other. So I don't know if it makes sense to, I mean, I need a minute or 2 to hook up the machine, if
Wanna
everybody
take
be
a 1 minute
patient.
recess? Or we'll take like a 1 or 2 minute recess to give you a chance.
Very good, thank you.
Sure.
Much. My name is Brennan Prine, 265 Northwestern Avenue. I've been here, as you know, many times in the past, and always kind of having organized the local neighbors in the community. And for the most part, we've always put forward some kind of an alternative to whatever the applicant is proposing. We are not doing that tonight. Our understanding is that if the Atria facility is not accepted, that the applicant is prepared to move forward with the 52-unit age-qualified development. So we understand that it's going to be one or the other. That would probably be some comfort to some of the folks who gave testimony in favor of the age-qualified housing, because I think it sounds like that's going to be there regardless of which way this goes. Given that dynamic of either seeing Atria plus the 32 or the age-qualified full development, we did have a meeting among all the property owners contiguous to the tract last weekend, and it was unanimous that we would rather see the full age-qualified 52-unit development rather than Atria for various reasons that you'll hear tonight. So I'll give you that as a kind of an overall introduction. The part of the presentation that I am going to address is tax revenue. One of the things that Ross was saying earlier was we're here for a variety of reasons, but I think that all of you know that there's really one reason that we're back at the table today, even though this proposal is similar to the one that was rejected last year. And that was because of the expectation that a large amount of incremental tax revenue would be made available because of the Atria facility rather than the 52 home age qualified plan. So as you know, I've exchanged information with Dennis and his group. And what I'm going to do is just go through about 3 or 4 slides that call into question the revenue assumptions that have accrued to the Atria facility, and actually make the point that the township can have no certainty that their revenue will be any higher with Atria as an as a assisted living facility plus the 32 versus the 52 home plan. So to start, just to give a little bit of background, I don't know why that one came across. Every number that you see here was obtained directly from the applicant. This is their slide. And what it does is it shows the portion of the overall revenue. In the case of both the township and the school district, it comes from millage, the percentage that is applied to the assessed value of a property. So in the case of the township revenues, the number that I got from Dennis's group today was about 80,000 of the 128,000 in projected revenue will come from millage, and about 680,000 out of 709,000 in the case of the school district will also come from millage. So just kind of give you that as a general conception. And to point out also that, as the applicant has said, total assessed value is about 36 million, of which 21.9 million is assumed to be the assessed value for the Atria property. So what I have done is really focused on Atria alone and said, okay, what what's being said about Atria versus what is a potential alternate scenario. So the first thing I want to do is give you what I'll call the kind of reality test. What you're looking at here are records of two properties that are the highest revenue producing properties in the township. Certain ones have a higher assessment, but they're exempt. But Lincoln Woods is the highest revenue producing non-exempt property. It has an assessment of $13,676,000. And you have the Flowertown Shopping Center. Flowertown Shopping Center is 8.3. They add up to, and that's actually two different tracts that constitute the Flowertown Shopping Center. They add up to about $22 million in assessed value. So effectively, the applicant is asking the board to believe that Atria at 7 acres is going to be assessed at the same amount as the combination of both of the largest properties, the highest revenue producing commercial properties in the township. This one's 22.7 acres, this one's 17.7 acres versus the 7 for Atria. So there's just something about that from my perspective doesn't feel right. It makes me very skeptical that the $21.9 million valuation is actually going to happen when the county looks at Atria. So going further, and I know it's hard to see this chart, I did some research. I actually found through the Montgomery County Property Records tax database all the facilities within a 10-mile radius that are in the same business as Atria. What I did is I used the specific land use code for taxable nursing and assisted living, not nursing facilities. And what I was able to find were 11 facilities that had similar acreage to what's being proposed for Atria and were within a 10-mile radius fitting that test. There were definitely competitors to Atria, things like Symphony Square, Solana, Horsham, a lot of the Sunrise properties, which is actually another company that has a relationship with the same real estate investment trust that Atria does. This is absolutely the same market. And what we need to do is we need to look at, what is the way in which these facilities are assessed on a comparison basis. So what you can see is that when you look at it on the basis of, and the way to equalize this is to look at assessment per bed. Atria says they're going to have 175 beds. Some of these facilities are smaller. But if you divide the number of beds by the assessed value, you can see that they all fall into kind of a general cohort here, with the average being about $50,700 per bed is the assessment. The assessment that the applicant is representing that Atria will provide is $125,200 per bed. That's straight math, because I got the number on the assessment right from Dennis, and we know that it's 175 beds for Atria. So the applicant is asking you to believe that when Atria is assessed, that it will be assessed at 2.5 times the rate of any other facility of a similar type in the township. If that happens, it's going to violate a Pennsylvania constitutional requirement for uniformity. Uniformity in the Constitution says that taxes have to be uniform upon the same class of subject. It's my feeling, or at least my hypothesis, that in doing his fiscal impact study, that the applicant did not really count on the method of assessment that the county will use, which is generally based on comparative income between properties of similar type, and failed to do a market comparison or due diligence that performed this market test and said, look, what's the, what is the likelihood that we're going to get this kind of assessment, given that every other facility is far, far less than that. So that's very much a concern to me. Going just a little bit further, what I did is I said, okay, well, what if instead of using the number of 21.9 million as the applicant has stated to drive the revenues. That instead I used the average, and I took that $50,000 average per bed, and I multiplied that by the 175 beds to say what would that mean in terms of the assessed value for Atria. The answer to that, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, is the assessment would come in around 8.8, maybe almost $8.9 million. And if you change that one number in the applicant's analysis, then the bottom line tax revenue benefit to the township projected goes from 1.3 million, which is represented here, to 883,000, which is hardly different than the 819,000 that the applicant has already said would be generated by the approved plan for the age-qualified facility. There actually are some other things that I could also quibble with in the analysis, more minor points. But if you look back to some of the detailed information that Ben has provided, you'll see that the age-qualified facility under the plan that drives 1.36 million has no expenditures related to it, whereas the one from the approved plan has 83,000. So I think there are, if I had the opportunity to look at some of the detailed numbers, you might even be able to find lesser difference between these two, but that's not really the point. The point is that if the market conditions rule here, and I think they will, then the township can really count on very little to potentially no incremental tax benefit versus what's already approved from the 54-unit plan. So to me, it means two things. It means, why are we here? It means that the board should be asking some very, very tough questions of the applicant in terms of how these tax promises were arrived at. And it leads me to one question for the board, which is, in a decision which is as important as this one is and has the impact on the residents that it will have you yourselves made the effort to do an independent evaluation of what the applicant reports? So can I ask that question to the board?
No.
No? Okay. Well, it's my understanding that it hasn't been done, so this is what I believe to be the case, and I would urge the board, before making any decision, to engage in that independent analysis. So that's my part of the presentation. And now, very briefly, John Schwartz is going to be next.
No, Russ, because we took all of your witnesses before we took questions, so let's do all of yours now, Brennan.
Sure.
John Schwartz, 277 Northwestern Avenue. This is a view of from my driveway at the new Masonic home. At night, Saturday night, these are the lights coming in on the new driveway. Can't really tell it, but that's the new addition to the Masonic home. This is what I'm looking at today. There's no buffer here that people were talking about. There's a few mature trees, which the leaves have come off of now. So now I'm looking at this every night. And we're talking about changing the variance to move this 4-story structure, which will face my house, 50 feet from my property line, along with all the light pollution that's going to go along with the new facility. So that's why I'm not in favor of this. Mostly it's this setback that I'm really upset about, that we would even consider doing that. So I'm looking at this as a quality of life issue for me, because I'm the guy that's right next to this. I need to improve it. That's all I've got.
Okay, sir.
Thank you for your time and for hearing me. My name is Bill Stroud. I'm at 245 Northwestern Avenue.
I didn't hear you.
Bill Stroud,
Okay.
245 Northwestern Avenue. And I know this is quibbling, but there were a couple of individuals that testified that there are 2 institutional properties that are adjacent to this 7.1 acres, and I don't believe that's true. There's only one, and that's in Whitemarsh. The nursing home is not adjacent. There's several residential properties between this property and the nursing home. You'll have to excuse me. I'm scheduled for cataract surgery. I can barely read. Section 609B1 of the Pennsylvania Municipal Planning Code reads in part, if the proposed amendment involves a zoning map change, notice of said public hearing shall be conspicuously posted by the municipality at points deemed sufficient by the municipality along the tract to notify potentially interested citizens. The affected tract or area shall be posted at least 1 week prior to the date of the hearing. I took a walk on Tuesday last week with my camera looking for those postings on Ridge Avenue, and there were none. There were just none there. I printed out the pictures, and I have them to submit as evidence if I can do that.
Yes, you can, sure.
There's 2 copies, so you can just put them up. That's all I have. Thank you.
What?
My name is Walter Flam. I'm 249 Northwestern Avenue. 2 sides of my property, excuse me, join the TC property. First of all, brief support of Brennan's tax analysis. I have a company called RETA, Real Estate Tax Appeals, very clever acronym, that does for people who own, who object or have a problem with the real estate tax assessments, gets them lowered. And the methodology that we use to do that on a commercial property is very similar to what Brennan has used here. My major point, though, is that as I read the ordinance that talks about age-qualified residential, it says that the provisions of this article shall serve as an alternative form of development in AAA residence districts subject to the following. There's a couple of them. Has to contain a minimum of 30 developable acres and a couple of others. But it also says that the parcel of land fronts on a principal arterial road as designated by the Comprehensive Plan of 1998. Approval of atria, in my opinion, then makes the proposed 33-unit development undoable as in violation of the zoning code, because it will not abut a primary artery. Maybe somebody here has all solved this problem, but I think if somebody wants to bring a key tom or make a big objection when they try to develop, the rest of that property doesn't border on Ridge Pike, and they can't build the 55 they can't build the 33 units. They can do atria, but not both. Thank you.
Brendan, did you have anything else?
That's all.
All right, are there any other residents who want to speak on this? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Bonnie Davis. I live at 506 West Heather Road. I'm a resident and also the township tax collector and treasurer. What Brennan just said blew my mind because he was really on point about a lot of the information about the taxes. I just came back from doing a seminar across the street. I was supposed to do it in here, and then this meeting superseded. For the people that just bought all the properties at Hawkswell Circle, Penn Manor, Sandy Run, the projected income for taxes from those properties is not coming in at what was promised. These numbers of the $22 million assessment, completely off the rails. As Brennan said, it takes multiple properties that are taxable to even come near that. The top 10 assessed properties in this township, only 2 are taxable. The ones that they were speaking about that are also institutional are schools and churches and things. They're not taxable. So our 2 highest, and he said Lincoln Woods absolutely is one of our highest. It used to be all the nursing homes. It used to be Fairview and Harston Hall and Chestnut Hill and all of them. They were the top 5. And every year I give a list of the top 5 taxable properties to the township. They want to know that have they paid and what are the taxes. Most of them have appealed. They started out at maybe 5 million, now they're down to like 2.5. They do it based on, are there empty beds? They do it based on what kind of income are they bringing in. If it's not bringing in the income, they appeal. Sometimes they're shot down. They're not always successful. But as Mr. Flam pointed out, there are companies, there are attorneys that this is what they do. Their job is to get this done for you. And so my fear is that the money that we're being promised, the revenue, the tax revenue, is not going to come in where it's being promised. If you look at all the other properties, and Brennan did his homework, and I do this every day, I see the properties that are being reassessed. I see that the properties that people are paying, and if you can do it 2 ways. You can reverse it and say, okay, this is what I paid for a property, let's reverse it back to the assessed value. Every developer pretty much calls me before they quote any numbers. I have talked to Ryan Holmes. I have talked to Rouse Chamberlain. I have talked to the people that are building on Stenton Avenue. I've never had a phone call from anybody about this property saying, what do you think the taxes might be? I talked to the Board of Assessment about it. We all get together, we all say, what we think the taxes might be. Because when you're building something from scratch, you don't have anything to base it on. If you buy an existing home, you know what the taxes might be. So we all sort of do the calculations together, come up with a general, maybe this is close, I don't know. Commercial properties, of course, are different than residential. Assessments are based on 1996 prices. So when you're coming up with an assessed value, it's based on 1996 prices of lumber, labor, wiring, stucco, tiles, everything. It's all done, in a formula. It's just like an appraisal. They come to your home, they say, plug and chug your square footage, all this kind of stuff. It's not a number you just pull out of a hat and say, this is what I want it to be. You say, it's done in a proper form. So to come up with a number like $22 million when our highest assessed properties that are $22 million are schools and it's LaSalle, it's the high school, and it's the Mount. Those are the ones that are assessed at that level. Again, not taxable. But those are the kind of assessments, that's a much bigger property than what we're talking about here. And I just don't want people, I'm not disagreeing with building something there, I'm just saying people need to know what, they're being promised. The people that bought these homes over on Pennsylvania Avenue and Camp Hill Road, I'm holding these seminars because they're all so confused, they don't understand what's going on, they were told one thing by the developer, they were, and I'm trying to make them understand how these were assessed because they bought a piece of land and they had no idea what the assessment would be. Nobody knows. You really can't know until it's finished being built. So you can do estimates and you can come close, but these numbers aren't even close. They're just not. And then I worry that even if they do come in high, they'll turn around and say, well, we're going to appeal, we're going to say we're not making the income, we don't have the beds full. That's just what they do. You can look at the property records too. Brennan looked, he did his homework. Anybody can look at it. It's public information. You can see every one of those institutions has filed for appeal. Every one. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Sir?
Adina Birnbaum, 15 West Mill Road. I'm really here just to say that none of us, I don't think any of us, the neighbors, the people who came forward in favor of this, the people who are against this, none of us are against development. None of us are against people living in beautiful homes, buying beautiful homes, increasing our tax revenue, or even the possibility of atria. I think what I'm concerned about as a resident is holding true to our zoning laws and being very careful when we make these kinds of decisions about changing setbacks and doing age-qualified overlays of all of these different things, and not listening to our planning commission, not sending things to our zoning commission, and I think that we should seriously consider not approving this until we have a better understanding of where this is. I just think that we should not approve this because of the setback change that you're considering. I don't think that there is a shown hardship here. I think the property could go back further. It could maybe have less beds. It could maybe be turned. I haven't heard explanations of this and why this is a hardship to this developer to change our entire zoning for our entire township. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Matt Foley from 101 Northwestern Avenue. I just briefly comment that these changes to the zoning code as it existed in 2002, or whenever the saga began, this seemed just like a bit much to me. I just note that there are other large properties next to the TC tract, and down the road, I don't know what you're going to say to those other large property owners when they want to act in their economic interest and develop their properties as much as possible. Mr. Weiss is very eloquent, and I fear what he can do for the other residents of large properties up there. And the other point I'd like to make is, just as a voter, I find this frustrating. This seems to be nearly identical plan that was voted down last year, and we just had an election and a new set of commissioners coming in. And I know this happens all the time, but I find this very frustrating as a voter. So thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, Valentine Gorski, 15 West Mill Road, Flowertown. Earlier today, it was mentioned that there were a number of exhibits that were presented to the board as late as today. Have those exhibits been made available to the public in any way, shape, or form?
You talking about the emails with Brennan? Yeah.
No,
There
I didn't follow exactly what all was, but
stuff that
that
came
there
in
were
in the
things
last-
you mentioned as exhibits that you all know about,
Yeah,
that none of us do.
Brennan's letter from November.
I think there's 3 emails and a letter.
These 3 emails from Brennan.
Okay, so there's 3 emails and a letter. Have they been made public in any way, shape, or form before this
want
meeting
mine?
tonight?
Not mine.
I would respectfully request that the board postpone any decision on any of this zoning until those documents are made public, so that all of the residents of Springfield Township can see those documents.
Okay. Thank you
Well,
for your request.
Thank you.
Well, okay didn't mean okay.
Not okay, I meant thank you for your request.
I understand. I understand that
I did not mean
you
okay.
understood my request to mean
Right.
okay,
Understood
not
it.
that you would
Necessarily
delay everything. I understand that.
No,
I
thank you.
appreciate you.
I can't do that by myself.
I understand that, Mr. Daly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, then, Mr. Chairman, it would be, I guess, open for if there are questions from the board first of those witnesses that just came in, and then Mr. Weiss.
I have no questions. No questions. Anybody else?
Anyone have questions?
I'd like to ask Mr. Weiss just to, sorry, yes, could I ask you to speak to Brendan Prine's allegation that we want to see a $22 million assessment on this property, and how are you guys coming up with the assessment, and how does that?
I'm going to get to that. I have
Okay.
some questions for Mr. Klein.
Okay.
If I can ask him.
Sure you can.
Brennan, come on up here.
Have a seat.
I'll have a seat if you will.
What?
I'll have a seat if you will.
You can sit down and I can stand, so for once in my life I can be taller.
All right, sounds
than
good.
you.
That's close.
What was the last quip? I didn't hear.
It was close.
So not only is he taller than me, he's got more hair. All right, Brendan, are you a lawyer? No. Are you an appraiser?
I'm good at math, though.
Are you an appraiser?
No.
Do you know how to appraise a property?
I spoke to.
Answer my question. Do you know how to appraise a property?
I don't see how that's relevant.
Brendan, do you know the three ways that properties are appraised?
Yeah, there's the income approach, the market approach, and the cost approach. just as
Okay,
Bonnie described.
and do you agree that in those approaches, an appraiser can consider one or all?
Yes.
The properties that you have looked at, you mentioned Lincoln Woods and the Flowertown Shopping Center. Do you know how old they are?
I think I do, but more importantly, I know exactly how old the cohort is that I looked at.
I'm
for age
asking you,
qualified.
Brendan, I want you to stay with my questions, please.
Is this
You know
legal?
what?
Yeah,
I know.
I think this is right.
Okay. Brennan's the only one who can complain right now, okay? When you're sitting there, you can complain. This is an informal process. You realize, Ross, that you can just stand up and say you disagree with everything he said. But let's answer yes or no, and we'll all get home a little bit earlier, okay? Don't say yes, okay?
I don't know exactly when they were built, but
Okay,
I
that's
do
a
know
good
that
answer.
they
You can
paid
say, I
excise
don't know.
taxes
That's a
in the
perfectly
township.
good answer.
And do you know that, do you agree that when appraisers do appraisals and they look at comparables, they look for comparable properties?
Yes.
Do you think Lincoln Woods is comparable to Atria?
No, but that's not why I raised that
I
point.
asked you a question, Brendan. Do you think Lincoln Woods is comparable to Atria?
Okay.
I think Lincoln Woods
All right,
is
this-
more than comparable to
You know,
Atria.
and there really shouldn't be the calling out that's going on either here. Let's just take it easy. I agree that we're not gonna have a formal cross-examination. That isn't what happened previously, okay? So let's just, you can make all the statements you want later. They can make all the statements. Everybody has their opinions. None of this testimony was sworn. Okay, so that's where we are. This is a legislative process, not a quasi-judicial process.
Had we been in a different environment or a venue, I would have objected to Brendan.
I understand,
doing
but we're not.
Doing his arithmetic and providing you with his opinion as to how you should determine the value of the facility based on bids.
And I'm sure at the end of this, you will, Ross, but we're not gonna
I
allow
won't-
cross-examination.
I won't ask Brendan any more questions.
Is it okay for me to ask a question?
No, not right
Okay.
now. Not right now.
Dennis.
You finished.
Dennis, would you come up for a minute? Good, you can go back, Brendan.
Thank you, Ren. You're not gonna ask Dennis questions now, are you?
I'm just going to ask Dennis one question.
Well, no, you're not. No. We're not gonna do that. We're at the point where you can ask questions of all the witnesses that were put on against the application, and then at the end, you can have.
I'm done asking.
Mr.
I'm
Solicitor,
not going to.
this isn't direct answer to Baird Standish's question of Ross, trying to answer Baird's question.
Yeah, I just want to know the answer.
He wants to know how he came up with the
I want to
figures.
reconcile this in my mind.
Hold on.
Commissioner Standish asked the question of how
I'm
to
gonna
reconcile Brendan's testimony with Dennis's,
Okay.
I believe.
My answer to your question, Eric, is threefold. One, I'm going to answer it. Two, I'm going to ask Mark to answer it as to where his values came from. And three, I'm going to ask Dennis to answer it as to how he did his numbers. And I think that's what you're looking for. What's our response?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
And my response, as far as Brendan is concerned, is he's not an appraiser, he's not a lawyer. There was no foundation for what he had to say. But what he is an adjoining property owner who has done everything possible to object to the project. And when we were here a year ago, he came to this board and said to the board that density, density, density. He was 100% in favor of Atria. But he argued to you that he could come up with the money, and his people could come up with the money so
I
that
hate to
they're...
object, Ross. Can Dennis or Mark answer Baird's question? Because I think, I'm interested in the answer as well. We know where Brendan's objection is. We
Yeah, but
understand
my answer to the question includes recognizing what Brendan has to say for what it is. And he's arguing to you.
Baird, do you understand where Brendan's coming from?
He's
I
arguing.
understand where he's coming from. I just want to understand why we have a discrepancy in how you do the math. That's all.
The reason you have that is he is backing into what he's presenting to you and then finding what he can find without any authority or foundation or expertise to do it, to justify his conclusion. Mark, Would you please answer the question?
Atria, we actually hired a separate tax consultant to verify what Dennis did. They're called Paradigm. They're actually out of Collegeville, PA, and they did. It's also very common for us to have real estate taxes that are in this magnitude all over the country, and especially in New York, where it's even higher. My underwriting of the financial model includes those numbers, I can tell you that. So that's how we underwrote the project. Market value is construction costs and land. So this project is going to cost, north of $35 million to build with land and hard costs. I know what costs are. We're building right now of $150 million of projects in progress. I know what they are here in the area. So it's a real cost number. I'm not the tax assessor. Obviously, it is everyone's interest that when you're, people do try to get appeals, understand that. But that is a fair and honest assessment of the value of the property. I can't speak to the other properties that were listed. It's not an uncommon number for us at all, and it's also what we underwrote.
All right, Dennis?
The information Brendan provided wasn't shared with us today, so I couldn't read what he had up there. But the points I would make is that I think some of these facilities are older facilities. They were assessed at different times. Then a new facility typically gets assessed a little bit higher, which is what Atria would be. His point was that you're going to get as much under these qualified units as you're going to get under this, although I noticed that he didn't make any adjustments to the assessments on the age qualified units. So, he's kind of picking what he wants to pick out and question it. The only way we could do these things at this point in the process is to give you a general understanding of what the fiscal impacts are going to be. And the only thing we have is the market value that the developer says he's going to sell these for, and the construction and land costs that the developer provides. And we apply the assessed valuation criteria from the county, and that's how we get it. But I can't respond to his chart because I can't read it and I haven't seen it before. But I think the time frame, I think where some of those properties were, I think all those things kind of enter into the process as to why they're assessed the way they are.
The frontage.
The frontage.
Well, this is not a Brennan question, but it was something that was brought up by Wally Flam. Can he respond to that?
As I think several.
I'd like to try to keep it orderly if I could and not mix cases. So I'd like to finish if I could with the other folks, and then you guys can...
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were finished with everybody else.
No, we're not. There were still hands. I'm just trying to make sure.
I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
Okay. Oh, well, no, there was a question from...
From me.
From me.
Okay.
You turned it back to the board.
Okay. And was that the only question?
And that was my only question.
I
My only question.
was specifically waiting for
They
Ross
have
to
to finish.
answer that question, but I would like to know about the frontage issue.
Okay, and do you want to ask the witnesses who are just up here, or do you want to ask?
I would ask the applicant about it.
Go.
Is that?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Plausible at this
Yeah,
point in
well,
time?
we had the applicant put on its entire case with all its witnesses, and then we permitted all the questions.
Right.
I'm just trying to do the same thing, but I'm just the solicitor, so we can.
Well, this is an informal process.
Okay, the informal process. So ask anybody you want.
I would like to ask about the, Ross, about the access to...
As has been said several times tonight, there's no subdivision plan as part of what we've shown you. We've shown you what's being rezoned. The road can still have access out to Bridge Pike, it still have frontage there. There's no specified width of frontage in the ordinance. So the road that goes back to the age qualified area, whether it's zoned institutional or not, can still have frontage there and provide the frontage to the rear portion.
Thank you.
Okay. Where we left off was questions from the board for the witnesses who are against the project. Are there any more questions from the board?
No.
No? Okay, then we'll finish that portion. Now we'll do, I guess, final statements or questions if anybody has them. None of this has been sworn, so there's been a lot of statements in the questions. We all know that. That's okay. You're the applicant, Ross. You get to go first. If you want to summarize and disagree with anything, feel free.
As I said to Mrs. Flam when she asked me about the one issue, why is the Masonic Home a justification for coming back? And I said that the reason for coming back and the reason for asking you to reconsider the zoning is it's a totality of circumstances. It's not one thing. And if you remember the remarks that I made at the very beginning, I did not focus on the tax revenue issue. I did not focus on the tax revenue issue because the tax revenue issue is not is the most important issue in our opinion. Whether you have 52 or you have Atria and 32, there's still going to be an increase in taxes. That's correct. But the reason to have Atria is because what it provides to this community. I thought it was kind of cavalier that the adjoining property owners would tell you what they want and then expect you to accept that as your decision because in their opinion, that's what's best for the community. You have to decide what's best for the community. You have to decide if the Atria use is justified, if it fits in on Ridge Pike, and if it provides a benefit to the community. I think clearly from the testimony that you heard from Mark, from the testimony that includes what's on opposite sides of it and whether it's adjacent to it or not, I think that the Andorra Nursing Facility is close enough to Atria to have an understanding of what's going on Ridge Pike. The determination should be whether that use is the right use for that property. And if you think that is the right use for that property, and if you think and you recognize that the balance of the property is entitled to be rezoned and developed residentially, then I would ask that you make your decision based on all these circumstances and not based on Brennan's opinion with no foundation, no expertise to deal with the numbers and say he's good at math and come in and say to you that the Atria deal is not as good as if there were 52 single-family houses. That's not, in my humble opinion, what you should be considering. What you should be considering is whether the Atria use is the right use. I began to mention a couple of minutes ago about where we were a year ago. And where we were a year ago was the argument that was made to you is that the number of units in the back should be sacrificed for the Atria use in the front. And for whatever reason, Brennan came in tonight and he didn't make that argument. And when he made that argument to you a year and a half ago, he said to you that he could deliver enough money to make this financially feasible and worthwhile for the TC family to only have 4 residential lots in the back and the Atria use in the front. And here we are, more than 18 months later, and nothing was ever done with that. And that goes to Brennan and his other residents' credibility as to what they really want to see or don't want to see. And there isn't much more that I want to say that you haven't already heard at this point in time. But I would only ask that you please make your decision based on what you think is good for the community as a whole and not what Brennan thinks is good for his property. And you heard all the benefits that our proposal has for these adjoining neighbors. Thank you.
All right, Brennan.
Final statement?
Final statement. That's
Okay.
fine. Keep
And
it
I think
short,
that
though.
I had a lot of attention in Ross's presentation there at the end, so I think it's appropriate for me to stand up for myself a little bit here. For some of you, I've been coming in front of this board for more than 10 years. And I hope you'll agree that whether we've agreed or disagreed with one another, that I've always acted based on facts and based on an incredible fashion. So I certainly hope that none of you would question my credibility or my ability to present facts. All that you heard tonight were facts that came directly from the applicant or from public records that are available to anybody with the wherewithal to look them up. I find it interesting that this is being kind of twisted in a way that the accusation was made that we had twisted the numbers to get the result that we want, when it seems to me that the numbers that are out of line that would serve the interest of the applicant are the ones that would appear to be out of line here. And lastly, on a more technical level, regarding the frontage question, I believe that Dennis just made the statement that that there would still be able to be frontage based on the road access. I have 2 points that would oppose that. One being reading the text of the zoning map amendment. The line of the property runs right along White Marsh, so the institutional is completely within the Springfield borders. And if you recall, the road that provides access splits between Springfield and White Marsh. So frontage in terms of egress from the age-qualified property would not even be within Springfield. So it's very difficult for me to see how that would be defined as frontage in any way, shape, or form. My main thing is that I hope that you've observed my actions over the past 12 years and would take issue with accusations about my credibility in these matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's okay, well, there is no record.
Okay, as long as you're fine with that, okay.
At least make the comment.
Oh, yeah.
You really had a chance to make statements. If the board wants to hear final statements after statements, that's up to the board, but.
What's that?
We have two hands who want to make apparently some
I was
reason.
getting ready to close the record. I mean, is there anything that Brendan hadn't said, or?
I would like to.
Well, can you make it from your seat?
I can, it'll take less time than we've taken to discuss.
That's all, go ahead.
Number one, on the mathematics, none of the witnesses here are experts in the area. Both of the witnesses here have reasons to want the numbers to turn out the way they want to see them. So when you're weighing those numbers, you have to attribute equal credibility to Mr. Glacken and Brennan, because both of them possess the same ability to appraise. Secondly, the question was, what's your job tonight? Your job is to decide what's good for the community. You decided that. You decided that a year ago. And I can't believe that any of you in your heart of hearts can sit there and say that the minuscule percentage increase in open area and 2 houses less is enough to make this board come back here. It has an awful lot of people asking questions, and a lot of those questions, I know, were manifested what people felt in the election that was just held.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Anybody else?
2 sentences.
Sure.
I feel that with all the questions raised tonight in regards to legal postings that were possibly not made, questions of the tax revenue, what it is and what it will not be, and whether the age-qualified development is even possible if the atria is built, zoned and built, that the board should either deny or at the very least postpone any vote on this until those issues have been addressed.
Thank you. With respect to the posting, Mr. Berg can speak to the postings himself.
They were posted by Mr. Taylor and I a week ago Thursday, obviously not Thanksgiving, but a week ago. And we put out 10 postings, both on the property and in the community. Andorra Road, Northwestern Avenue, Ridge Pike, and Manor Road, and then we went back into Eagle View as well.
On green paper?
The bright green paper, the same paper that you see for all the zoning hearing board notices. It's exactly the same
Or
card.
any photographs taken of those postings.
No, thank you for your comment. Next question, or next comment? I can't, is that Bonnie? I actually thought it was a person behind you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to address 2 things. One, do you want me to come up, or is it? Okay.
You're good there, because you're only gonna be a minute, right?
I am not gonna pat myself on the back, but I am an expert in the tax field. I've been doing this job 8 years. I talk to the Board of Assessments on a regular basis, if not daily, at least weekly. I help people all the time figure out about their assessment and how it's computed. Most assessments, even if you back into them by saying what a property is going to sell for, because it's the only way to figure it out. If it costs $37 million to build, whatever it is, you can sort of reverse that. and back into what the assessment might be. In most cases, it comes in much lower. And that's, again, what I just finished doing a program on across the street, is that when someone buys a house for $450,000 and their assessment comes in, then you can do a computation and say, but you're really paying taxes on a house worth $350,000. So you're not paying taxes on the full amount of a property's sale price, because assessment really has nothing to do with sale price. It's just a way to figure it out when there is nothing else to base it on, because there is no building yet. Second part is, there's the piece of property, the frontage that everybody keeps talking about on Ridge Pike. The Teachy property does not abut Ridge Pike. The piece of property, and I pulled it up on my phone, is a big property. If you press on this little tiny piece of strip of land that abuts Ridge Pike, it belongs to Springfield Township.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. With that, we will close the hearing. Thank everybody for attending. Before I make the following motions, I want to say thank you to everybody. It's been for coming out tonight shortly after Thanksgiving. I appreciate it on both sides and those in the middle. So at this time, I would move that the Board of Commissioners enact ordinance number 936, an ordinance rezoning 7.11 acres of land at 9303 Ridge Pike from AA to AA residential with a AAA and a AAA age qualified -1 overlay zoning districts to institutional zoning district. That is my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions on the motion?
Yeah, I have a couple comments.
Before you do,
Thank
okay?
Okay, we'll begin with my comments. First comment I have is Ridge Pike road improvements are one of the important factors in driving the decision. The road will be six lanes wide, right in front of the traffic light on both sides for a couple hundred feet. And it's not really a residential area, and Atria would provide a buffer for whatever does develop in the back portion of the property. I don't think residents would want to have their houses backed up to a six lane highway. We know a residential highway is a commercial highway, and that's one of my issues. Another thing is related to taxes. We've had the professionals the applicant had professionals provide their information, and it's not always accurate, as is the information that we get from professionals, not always accurate. We could take, for example, last year when we did our budget, we ended up raising taxes because we didn't think the income would be where we thought it would be. It just so happens that as of October of 2015, our enabling taxes were $200,000 over our projections at that point in time, which professionals gave us what the projections would be. So we're going to ultimately be significantly higher than what we had thought we would be, and we never would have had to raise those taxes to begin with had we gotten the proper information then. So we do know that that's not accurate, but I feel it's adequate. I think the open space for the township, so that can be handled during the land development, any potential sanitary sewer for the residents. But one of the main driver factors for it is that Ridge Pike is a commercial highway, Atria is a commercial venture, and the other issues, if they come out to be true, related to frontage, and then that changes the dynamic of the back and should be considered separate, and will be considered separate in the future. So I'm for the Atria portion of the project.
Any other comments? Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got a little to say. I don't have a speech or anything. And that is, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out, both those in support and those in opposition. You know, we need to hear from everybody. We need to listen to everybody, and I think no matter how we vote, we do. Secondly, I want to thank the Planning Commission for the work they've done on this. This has been going on for those of us that have been on the board 10 years. It was old when we came on, and this overlay had just been passed 10 years ago, so it's been a long time. The Planning Commission, in its most recent recommendation, what you're hearing, I just want to make sure people understand what it is they support Atria, but they support it provided that the density in the back be 25 or less, and we're looking at higher than that, so they don't support it. They don't support what's here to vote right now. The county planning opinion's even trickier to get through because the recent letter talks about a different approach to this, saying you can get to where you want through a conditional use under the age qualified. Well, we're not going that route now. And it says if you don't go that route, we go back to our letter before. And what the letter before said at its heart was, we think everybody thinks Atria is a good idea. They think it's a good idea, but their recommendation on the back is that we get rid of the age qualified overlay and go back to the AA, which is, in this last 3-year incarnation, we had that in front of us for about 10 months, and I actually supported that. I told Mr. TC that I supported that. I don't think the neighbors necessarily like that because there's downside to it. But my feeling was that the neighbors bought into, that would have made the neighbors, the old zoning, and that's what the neighbors bought into, for better or for worse. So I just want to point all that out, thank the hard work that's in there, and then say the way I view this is at the very highest level, you know, our responsibility is to run the township and to respect the property rights, respect everybody's property rights. And when you go to law school and you take your first property law, they teach you about Blackstone and what owning real estate is a bundle of twigs, which are various rights. And they didn't have zoning back when Blackstone said that, but when zoning came in, it made a whole lot more sense. You have certain rights. Some of those rights are that your neighbors won't do things, and some of those are that you can do things that you're not doing now. And when the Atria thing came forward, suddenly you had somebody wanting to do a whole lot on a piece of land, something that on 7 acres is equivalent to the most intense 40 acres in the township. So that's kind of a big deal what they wanted to do there. So there needed to be a reduction in the back. And that's just what I think had to work out. And you look at the balancing wall of that, and it just doesn't play for me. I don't think there's enough going on there. I voted against this hearing, and I did vote against it the last time. I would have voted for it if the overlay had been removed, but that, I was told, didn't work. So for those reasons, my position hasn't changed, but I recognize the good faith in trying to work it out, and if it goes through, I wish them well.
Thank you, Jeff. And on that last point, I think there has been a good faith effort on the Board of Commissioners. I mean, we had, I guess, a subcommittee meet with the developer over the summer. I think every commissioner's met at some point with the developer or in some fashion. I'm going back a year and a half ago. Pete and I met with Mr. TC and Ross and Glenn and Baird and I, and Jeff's met with Mr. TC as well. So I think Brendan, I actually met with Brendan on Good Friday in 2014, and we spent 2 hours together. And I told Brendan at that point it wasn't about the revenue. I think there's a need for this facility in the township, and then it's how we balance the back of the property. There is a need. We had Jeff and Baird and I were at a zoning hearing the other day, and they had to add an addition to the back of a house for an elder resident or elder mother who had beginning stages of a debilitating disease. And we gave zoning relief on that occasion, the zoning hearing board. So we did change zoning. So it does happen. And there's many of those instances where they don't need zoning relief, but those additions are placed on to put a mother-in-law quarters or a father-in-law quarters or to take care of a resident. Anecdotally, the same time I met with Brendan trying to put a loved one in a nursing facility in this area, everything is full. The hill at White Marsh is full. The villa is full. So in this township, and even outside this township, I believe there is the need, and the numbers, I think, justify that. Open space, we've talked about. The price point, $750,000 homes in the back, I do not think is low-income housing. The revenue projections, we can argue about that back and forth, but I think there's some agreement that there will be revenue from this development either way, which will be positive to the township. So they're just some of my thoughts going forward. So those are my comments. Anybody else have any other comments?
I was making comments. So I'm just going to tell you how I've sort of arrived at this. I was on the planning commission, I think it was 13 years ago, 14 years ago when this started. So I'm glad this is coming to an end. It's been a journey of, my son was only, I think, 8 at that point. He just graduated from college. Anyway, I sort of feel like I've been an outsider on this.
And you're over 55 too, Barry.
Yeah, there we go. And I'm 55 too at that point. Yeah. So I sort of feel like I've been an outsider. I'm trying to find the best way without feeling like I'm in one camp or the other.
I have to say that, I voted against having this public hearing, but, as I look at the new plan, I never really liked the 55 plan, and I didn't even vote at that point, just to let everybody know. And I have to say, looking at that plan and looking at the plan that's been presented tonight, I like the 55 or 52 unit plan less and less. The reason why I voted against the last year was I was really on the fence, and I really felt at that point that the developers were fairly intractable. We didn't have Mr. Nolan in the audience. We didn't have Mr. Tisi in the audience, and it was there was some contention. I just didn't go over with me. But I sort of feel that, at this point they've made some strides. I won't say it's a significant difference, but to my eyes, it's an effective difference. I look at the plan that they presented tonight versus the plan that we saw a month ago, and it's created some open space, and I don't think it's going to get any better. I like the atria. I've never been against the atria, and I'd like to see the atria. And I think that we've achieved something by, gaining some fewer houses. I don't know what to think about the tax situation. I think we're going to make some money. Maybe we're not going to make as much money as the developers think we're going to make. And I'd also like to say that I am the liaison to the Planning Commission. So I was at the Planning Commission meeting the other night, and I heard what Jeff said, but it was a really close vote. It was 4-3 against this plan without, scaling back the units, and it was 4-3 in favor of scaling it to 25. But the tenor was, to my mind, dramatically different. Whereas before, when they voted, they had not seen the plan. They just voted on the atria situation with without having looked at what would be planned, in the rear, and it was they were unanimously against it. So anyway, it's pretty clear that the developers weren't going to, scale back and come up with a plan for 25. So those are my thoughts, and I'll just leave you with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hearing no other comments, there's been a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Please record a 5-2 vote. The motion passes. The second motion is I move that to enact ordinance number 937, an ordinance amending the zoning code text through amendments to the dimensional requirements for personal care homes, assisted living residences within the institutional zoning district. That is my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Please record a 5-2 vote. The motion passes. And then the third motion, I move that to enact ordinance number 938, an ordinance amending the zoning code text through amendments to the open space requirements by decreasing the housing density and increasing the open space from 50% to 60% of gross developable acreage. That is my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jeff.
I'm just gonna think out loud. So this is reducing the density on the back, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, I thought I was gonna vote for this one. I don't wanna just vote no, but I'm
No,
voting
you're good.
I will vote for this one.
Is there any other comments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Please record a 7-0 vote. The motion passes. With that, the meeting is over. I thank you, everybody, for their attendance and for your advocacy.